Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Had a Synesthesia Quirk? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. It's a close thing. So close. He'd been so excited, just for a moment, but this was not a quirk. He should get one though, despite this strange condition he'd been diagnosed with. Inko had noticed it first. It was strange, after all, for her son to refer to a sound as yellow and blue, rather than happy-sounding or solemn as most did. She'd only been teaching him some basic piano. She'd taken it when she was a child, and music had made such an impact in her teen years. It was easy, and Izuku picked up the notes and finger placements easily. She'd been going over major versus minor keys with him, and tried to use an analogy that always worked for her when she was younger. Minor keys sound sad, and major keys sound happy. Izuku only looked at her, confusion written all over his face. Inko played the scale again, in an attempt to gain understanding, when Izuku lit up and said, "Oh, it sounds yellowish." Inko, eyebrows scrunched together and horribly confused, asked Izuku what he meant. Izuku claimed that when she played the notes in a major key, he could see splotches of color that got brighter as she went up the scale. Inko, naturally worried, brought Izuku to the doctor right away. It was there that Izuku had been diagnosed with chromesthesia. Hearing things caused his eyes to act up too, which was why he'd seen yellow and orange and red dash across his vision as Inko played the scales. The very next day, Izuku and Inko sat on a park bench and listened to a nearby performer. His trumpet was rather loud, and Izuku liked to watch as blues and greens bounced about in coordination with the music. They did it often, but only now did Inko see the way Izuku's eyes followed objects she couldn't see. It felt just a bit like she knew something more. She knew why his eyes tracked invisible shapes when she turned the radio on at home. She knew now that he never gazed off into space, but rather that he always had his eyes locked on something. It was so simple now. Izuku had never known that other people didn't see things like he did, that they couldn't see the way music swelled and shrank, its colors changing all the while. He tried to describe the way that a guitar had a warm orange sound, and that the shapes would swell as the musician got louder. He tried to explain how the singer's cool blue voice would warble in such a way that the shapes vibrated along with it. But she couldn't see it. Only Izuku could. It didn't mean she couldn't appreciate the way he tried. She always tried her hardest to visualize the way he saw it, but her shapes never quite synced up or had the right color. She could only guess at what he saw. It stayed this way for a year, Izuku trying to explain what sound looked like to people that either couldn't comprehend it or refused to listen. It was only for a year. A week after Izuku's 6th birthday, on a lazy Saturday morning, his eyes locked onto something and they wouldn't leave. She watched him carefully as he stared at something unseen. This wasn't so unusual, but there was no music playing. She had no idea what he could possibly be looking at. Fear hit her in that moment. She was used to not seeing what he saw, but this seemed wrong. He whispers to her, quietly, "Mama, the vase looks kind of funny," a strange sentence, that was for sure. "Why is that, Izuku?" She asks. Her son is smart, he should be able to tell there's something wrong, especially if he's the one seeing it. It's got these weird little waves coming off of it. Like, waves of blue. No green. He says, looking at the vase in confusion. The first observation sort of made sense. The vase is blue. Inko turns to inspect the vase, only to find that her once blue vase had now turned pastel green. Now it's orange. Izuku exclaimed, and yet again, the vase had indeed changed color. "Hey, Izuku. Get in the car, okay, sweetie? I think we need to go to the doctor." It made sense. Izuku's quirk must have come in. Hell, it might even be related to his chromesthesia. Okay, Izuku grabbed his notebook, filled with different sounds, and the colors and shapes that swam across his eyes when he heard them. It made Inko smile just a bit. It would never make any sense to her why dogs barking sounded like a red dodecahedron, but it made sense to him, and that was all that mattered. She climbed into the car, Izuku seated and buckled into his car seat behind her, doodling in his notebook. They quickly made their way to the doctor's office in only 20 minutes, where they signed in and made a walk-in appointment, seeing as this particular doctor, thankfully, had nothing scheduled for today. They sat in his office 10 minutes later, with the doctor holding various, brightly colored objects in front of Izuku and asking if he could change the color. Izuku succeeded a few times, and even accidentally turned the poor doctor bright purple, before he sat there for a good 5 minutes and struggled to turn it back. I don't know if you read Izuku's file before we came in here, but he's been diagnosed with chromesthesia, Inko explains. Do you think it could be related to his new quirk of his? I didn't know that actually, the doctor says, but yes, it could be related. He doesn't really physically change the color of the object, nor is he casting an illusion of any sort. Rather, he's manipulating the light waves. It could easily be related to this chromesthesia of his. Considering the nature of his quirk and condition, I'd watch out for any sound manipulation as well. I wouldn't doubt that he could easily cancel out or increase sounds. Thank you, Doctor. Inko and Izuku left after a few more standard tests, and due to the rise of quirks and how prevalent they'd become, it was all covered by insurance. Inko couldn't help but sigh in relief at that. Izuku went to preschool again Monday, eager to tell the other children that he had a quirk now. One that went along with his strange ability to see sound at that. He was excited, to say the least. Izuku had an odd habit of keeping track of the colors he saw when listening to things. He carried around a little notebook where he kept notes on all the unique sounds he heard and what he saw when he heard them. It was interesting today, though. The colors were just a bit different, the shapes a bit less stable. He'd have to experiment with that later and maybe revise his notebook a bit. They finally arrived at the school, where the delighted shrieks of multiple children caused pure red spikes to flash angrily in the corner of Izuku's vision. Izuku turns and hugs his mother goodbye, and is soon led by the teacher on duty to the play area, while they waited for the bell to ring. Inko had to go to the principal's office to drop off Izuku's quirk forms, anyway. Izuku ran over to Katsuki the moment he got the chance, pulling his dark red notebook out of his bag, so that he could show Katsuki his quirk. Kaken, look, I got my quirk. Izuku says, excitedly waving his notebook about. Well, what is it, Deku? He shouts. No way it's as good as mine, he mumbled as an afterthought. Okay, just watch, Izuku says, ignoring the nickname. He holds his notebook out in front of him and concentrates on the shimmering waves it emits. He grasps them in his head, the way he did at the doctor's, and bends them into shape, just the way he wants. Katsuki watches as a previously red notebook turned bright green before his eyes. It's all right, I guess, he says, watching closely for any tricks, though it seemed there were none. That's not all. The doctor said I might be able to do something with sounds too, but I haven't been able to try it yet, Izuku rambles. Like what? Katsuki asks. There's still no way it could possibly be better than his quirk. I don't know yet, Izuku answers quietly now. He kept talking about waves and stuff and I couldn't keep up. Katsuki huffs. Well, it's better than nothing. You're not totally useless, so it's something. Yeah, one of his little cronies chirps up. The one with wings, Tsubasa? You'll never have to use hair dye or anything, and maybe you can show us what those weird colors look like when you hear music and stuff. It's a good idea, but Izuku thinks he'd have to train more with his quirk to do that. Maybe when I can change the colors faster, he mumbles. Can you just leave it like that? Katsuki asks, pointing at his notebook, which Izuku was no longer paying attention to. Oh yeah. Apparently, when I change the color it does it permanent dash. Izuku stumbles over the word for a moment. Permanently. He exclaims. At least, unless I want to change it back. Izuku focuses hard on his notebook for a moment, turning it back to its original red color. Cool. Tsubasa shouts. Katsuki sneers at him, and he backs down. The bell rings, and they're all shepherded inside, where they sort of learn things, and otherwise just have playtime. One of the teachers walks up to Izuku, who's sitting in a far corner and writing in his notebook about the squeaky noise that plastic cars make, and the bright yellow starburst that corresponds with it. She squats down next to him, and starts to talk to him. The teachers find him endearing and polite, and they always like to listen to the way Izuku described the shaky pink square of a maraca, or the silvery bead of the finger cymbals when they do music time. Hey Midoritan, she says softly, I heard your quirk came in recently. Can you tell me what it is? He knows this drill. The teachers do it every time a student develops their quirk, just to make sure all is well. Sure. He says, excitedly, the doctor called it wave control, but I'm not sure what that means. He asked me to do a couple things, like this. Izuku holds up his notebook, and the shaky yellow drawing on the page turns neon pink. He changes it back just as quickly. He said I might be able to do something like that with sounds too, but I don't know yet. That's very useful, Midoriya-chan. The teacher exclaims, clapping her hands, and it's just perfect for you. Why, I'm sure it'd make for an interesting show if you were to try to show someone what you see. He knows what she's referring to. Everyone that had heard about his quirk so far had mentioned it. Yeah. The doctor even said that's why it's possible to do the same thing with sounds. Izuku is excited, of course. His unique ability to see sounds in such a vivid way was interesting to people, and now they were interested in another part of him. Well, I'm sure that, with practice, you'll be able to do even more. She ruffles his hair, and stands, so she can go deal with a couple misbehaving students. Izuku smiles even wider, as Tsubasa leaves Katsuki and his other friend to sit next to Izuku and watch the things he draws. It's a few weeks later that anything new happens. Inko is cleaning in another room and has the radio on full blast. Even so, it's cheap and not very loud. Izuku is sitting at a table, working on a couple coloring sheets, as he tries to stop changing the colors by accident. He tries to lightly mark what each color should be with a pencil, so that he can change it all back later. His quirk had started acting up a bit, and he'd even accidentally turned Kaken's hair blue. The song is quiet and solemn, full of black and navy and purple, with just hints of mahogany. He doesn't know how to work the radio, so he doesn't try to change it, and his mother doesn't seem to mind the song's blue tones, so he lets her listen. That doesn't mean he likes it though, and the sad sounds and lack of control over his quirk are making him frustrated. I wish the radio would stop, he thinks. And seconds later, it does. This is quite the surprise, as it was brand new, they'd only bought it a few days ago, so the speakers should be working fine. The batteries hadn't died, as it had none, and just plugged into the wall instead. Izuku stared at the red blinking light on its corner, trying to solve this sudden mystery. Inko came into the room moments later, and picked up the radio, trying to inspect what happened. She put her ear up to the speaker, and said she could still hear it, but just barely. It was then that Izuku saw the waves, so that's what the doctor had meant, emitting from the radio speakers. He focused on the waves, trying to make them louder. The waves suddenly enlarged, and the radio was even louder than before. Inko jumped back, nearly dropping the radio, before catching it and holding it at arm's length. She set it on the counter instead. Mama, I did that. Did you see? Izuku says, realizing what he had accomplished. He focused on the waves again, until they shrunk down, back to the size they were. Inko turned the radio off altogether, and turned to congratulate him. She hugged his tiny body to herself and said, Good job, Izuku. That was amazing. Izuku is back at school again the next morning. Inko corrected his quirk registry online, but had to correct the physical copy the school had. Izuku had immediately run over to Katsuki and told him about this new ability. Katsuki brushed it off as not being as powerful as his, while Tsubasa told him how cool it was, and asked multiple questions about it. Izuku answered them patiently, as Katsuki scowled at the new development. It seemed he wasn't fond of anyone hanging around Izuku, but he wouldn't say anything with so many people around. Izuku decided that day that he wasn't very fond of the way Katsuki acted. Maybe he'd change, but for now, Izuku would avoid his crimson-red voice. The day went uneventfully as normal. A teacher asked him about his new ability, and Izuku regaled the story of how he found it. She ruffled his hair again, and left to deal with Katsuki. Tsubasa stole her place next to him again, as he had been doing these past weeks. He liked to watch Izuku draw, whether it was mindless shapes or surprisingly intricate drawings, for a 5-year-old at least. He was nice to talk to, and Tsubasa often asked him what he saw when he heard different noises, and Izuku would flip to a page in his notebook and make the colors move just slightly so he could see the way a dog's bark popped like a balloon only to shrink back rapidly, or the way a tire's screech left shrieking yellow triangles across the page that moved with the wheels. He was always quite interested in Izuku, actually, but Katsuki seemed to hate Izuku. Tsubasa had drifted away from Katsuki during these years, and soon he and Izuku were fast friends. Izuku enjoyed speaking with Tsubasa about quirk theory and whether the letter A was bright red with a black outline, or sky blue with no outline at all. There were petty arguments that ended in laughter, and real arguments that ended in the silent treatment on both ends, until one realized they missed the other too much. There were only 2 fights like this, and they vowed to always look for another solution first. Tsubasa stuck by Izuku's side for years, until the 7th grade, when he disappeared off the map. Izuku assumed he'd only had a few sick days at first. It made sense. They didn't live too close to each other, and had no phones to contact each other with. That had to be it. A few sick days. But then it became a sick week. A sick month. And suddenly Izuku suspected that Tsubasa wasn't sick at all because there was no way he'd just disappear for a month. Inko hadn't gotten any calls on the situation, even though she and Ms. Tsubasa were good friends. Izuku was confused and hurt, to say the least. When he got home, he asked his mother if she needed the computer, because he needed it to search for something. She told him it was fine, and that she was going to be out tonight, so dinner was in the fridge. Izuku kisses her goodbye as she leaves, and logs into the computer. He goes to the search engine and types in Tsubasa's name along with the prefecture. Immediately, a news article pops up. There are no others with the name in them, so Izuku goes to the only one with Tsubasa's full name. He remembers the next few minutes all too well. He reads the article carefully, as talks about how Ms. Tsubasa had been shot in her own home and her son had gone missing. It hadn't been broken into as far as they could tell, and nothing was taken from the house. Izuku panicked. He rushed to the bathroom as he felt bile rise in his throat. Tsubasa is dead. Izuku's best friend has been missing for well over a month. He was either dead, or he wouldn't be found. As much as Izuku hated these moments, he supposes it's what drove him to heroics. He felt that no other person should ever experience this horrible feeling. He wanted to make sure that no one else could be stolen from their homes, mother likely killed in front of their eyes, as they were dragged away, screaming, crying. Izuku remembers the warm orange-yellow bubbles that made up his voice, and retches again. He can't help but remember how well it had matched him, how well the buttercup-colored shapes looked so natural in front of his body when he spoke. He'd asked Izuku what he saw when he talked once. Izuku had told him that his chromesthesia affected voices as well, and described his mother's dark navy ribbons and Katsuki's crimson-red spikes, so similar to a dog's bark. Tsubasa was curious, and he even teared up when Izuku described the gold beads that floated into his vision and flashed and swelled and dipped when he spoke, and the way it fit him so well. The evening had been surprisingly emotional, and it's one of Izuku's most cherished memories. He's angry, because there will never be any quiet moments like that again. Tsubasa's life had been cut short, and now Izuku would never again see those orange-yellow orbs float in front of his eyes as they used to. Here he is, the survivor. He's all alone now. He's right about one thing. Tsubasa's death was most definitely what drove him to heroics. It's the beginning of his 8th grade year, and their teacher was handing out high school pamphlets. Make sure you're thinking about what high schools you want to go to, kids. You all. The man trails off and throws all of the pamphlets in the air, rather than handing them out. Oh, who am I kidding? You all want to go to hero schools, don't you? He shouts. Izuku keeps his head low and doesn't speak. After Tsubasa's death, he'd migrated to the back of the classroom, and tried not to speak to anyone. He had no close friends, and it was a bit late to be making any. High school could be a new start for him. Katsuki went on some stupid spiel that Izuku wasn't listening to. Something about being better than everyone else. He'd hear it all before. Hey, Midoriya, you're planning on going to UA too, right? The man says. That traitor. He knew Katsuki would come after him later and he still said it. Why yes sir, he mumbles, just barely loud enough to hear. He uses his quirk to amplify the bright green bolts of his own voice. No one said a word. They couldn't believe that the tiny, quiet Midoriya would even think of going to UA. They always seemed to forget his true destructive power. He'd used his quirk to its fullest extent once, and that had been out of purely self-defense. He'd taken out 2 whole buildings, and all he did was yelp. His quirk had boosted his sound waves, and the vibrations were enough to shake 2 buildings off of their foundations. He could only count himself lucky that both were due to be demolished. The mugger never stood a chance. Then came the noise. Neon pink and sharp, as his peers laughed at him, throwing brightly colored insults his way. Now students. Let's calm ourselves, the teacher called out. The class shut up and lessons continued. Izuku packed his things quickly as possible, but it wasn't nearly fast enough, as Katsuki caught him by the shoulder and held fast until everyone else left. So, Deku, he says. His red voice is darker, sharper, and held a promise of danger and hate. You think you can just enroll for UA? His voice is low, quiet. Too quiet. You'll be getting in my way, he says. I'll be the only student from this idiotic middle school to get into UA, so you better apply somewhere else. It's not a competition, Katsuki. He'd stopped calling him Kakin so long ago. I only want to become a hero. I'm not here to get in your way or anything. Katsuki's already rough grip on him tightens, and Izuku can smell the sickly sweet smell of nitroglycerin burning. Here's a tip, Deku. Go up to the roof and take a swan dive off of it. You'll be out of my way then, he says. His hand leaves his shoulder, and Katsuki turns away from him. Hey, after all, Katsuki says over his shoulder, you might even join Tsubasa. Izuku is still and quiet until he leaves. Even after a few minutes, he doesn't move. When he finally leaves the classroom, he heads for the roof. Izuku stands at the edge. His bag has been thrown to the side, and he can't hear a thing except the breeze in his ears. He can't even appreciate the way that grayish-white stripes paint his vision like he usually would. Is it worth it? He thinks, after all, it's not like anyone will care. Except Mom, but you're such a burden to her already. He leans a bit further over the railing. Hell, maybe you'll really see Tsubasa again. That snaps him out of it. But you said you'd become a hero for Tsubasa. You said no one had to be hurt like that again. You can't give up now, you idiot. Izuku shoves himself away from the railing, grabs his bag, and stumbles back down the stairs and to the ground. He walks home, head pounding as the miasma of sound colors his vision again. There are no golden bubbles swelling and shrinking in sync with a dear friend's voice, and there likely never will be again, but Izuku vows to himself to protect these people's voices. To protect their color, their light, and their lives. He will become a hero, just so that they'll never have to feel what he felt like that dreaded day. Izuku wakes up the next morning, and prepares himself for whatever the world may throw at him. Sure, he's tired, but it's Saturday. He could do whatever he wants for a while. He walks down to the kitchen, and forces himself to eat, despite already feeling nauseous. It had always been that way. His mother had left a note on the fridge, saying that she'd gone out for errands. He doesn't worry about it. Errands usually stayed close to the house. He leaves his own note, saying that he's gone to the mall to buy some stuff and kill time. He puts it next to her note, so that she can see it when she gets home. He leaves the house with a random bag on his back, and about half of his allowance in hand. He doesn't need to buy much, but he doesn't know how long he'll be out either. Better safe than sorry. The train ride there is quiet, and most people don't even look at each other. Thank God. He's not sure he'd be able to care much about colors that danced across his vision. The mall itself was louder, but again, that was all fine. It was a low buzz in the back of his head, as dark blues and pinks appeared in the corner of his eye. He makes his way to the music store instead. His soundboard wasn't going to build itself. Izuku's shopping was, surprisingly, done in under an hour. He could just kill some time before he went home, or he could just go home immediately. Both options were at least a little appealing. Either way, he decided to just window shop until 8, which was when the mall started crowding up too much. Izuku still, to this very day, curses his decision-making skills. He could have gone home and completely avoided getting a bit maimed in a villain attack, but no. He had to get caught up in the whole mess. Idiot Izuku. It was quiet, just for a moment. All the colors in his vision disappeared, and Izuku nearly panicked. It was unnatural for all color to disappear. There was always something in the corner of his vision. And suddenly, it all exploded in bright, deadly reds and oranges and yellows. The sound is sharp and it hurts him. He falls to the ground as someone shoves him aside in their panic, running away from whatever was making that horrible noise. Izuku can barely stop himself from screaming back. That would be public quirk usage and illegal, seeing as Izuku hasn't even seen the villain yet. All at once, the sound and commotion stops again. The building is no longer rumbling, which Izuku had only noticed in the absence of said rumbling, and the horrible noise had stopped. He's able to get his feet underneath himself and gain control of his arms again. Instead of running away, he runs towards where the sound had been coming from. Izuku is a smart kid, but no one said he had common sense. When he gets there, there is in fact a villain. A villain with a hostage. The boy looks about Izuku's age, maybe older, due to his height. He's not struggling at all despite the villain's hold on him, and the villain has completely stopped moving. He has a gaping maw, which Izuku assumes is where the sound had been coming from, and his eyes are white. The noise is less here, as police haven't arrived yet. "Are you all right?" Izuku says quietly. He carefully manipulates the waves to only speak to the boy, instead of the villain holding him. "Yeah, I'm fine," he says, sarcasm dripping from his voice. "1 second. Let go of me," he says. Not to Izuku, but to the villain holding him. White eyes flash, and the boy is set down, though rather roughly. He jumps to his feet quickly, keeping his distance from the hulking beast of a man in front of them. He rushes forwards and grabs Izuku's arm. "Let's go," he says, tugging Izuku along with him. The villain, docile and complacent, is easily apprehended, but neither of them would know that until later. The other boy rushes into a store towards the back of the mall, pulling Izuku in with him. There are a good 10 or 11 people in the store already, who shush them and pull them behind the large counter. "What's happening out there?" one asks. The hostage starts to talk, and Izuku isn't paying much attention because he can see tiny black spots, something he identified as footsteps. A policeman comes into the store and finds them all crouching behind the counter. He tells them the villain has been apprehended and that he needs to speak to anyone that may have used their quirk on the villain. The boy steps forwards, and it's only now that Izuku can appreciate how he towers over everyone else in the room, excluding the policeman. Izuku can't help but feel a bit inferior. He's taken away and likely questioned, while everyone else is free to go, seeing as there were no injuries. The whole altercation was quite uneventful. Izuku is allowed away, but he waits instead. He wants to make sure that other boy was okay. It's a good half hour before the other actually appears, and even then he seems to be in no hurry. Izuku rushes up to him, until he's walking by his side. He has to walk twice as fast, due to the boy's apparent leg length. That might get annoying after a while. "Hey," he says, trying to get his attention. "Hello," the boy mumbles. He slows down a bit, supposedly to let Izuku talk. "So, are you all right?" Izuku says, for lack of better wording. "You already said that." "What do you mean?" He hadn't said that, had he? "Yeah. When you first ran up to the villain," he points out. "So, you want to start off with a different question?" Izuku has to stop and think for a minute. He had indeed said that before. It takes him a moment, before he starts to laugh, and he can't stop it. He's got his head thrown back, and he's laughing uncontrollably. The other boy starts to laugh too. It's only now that Izuku can really appreciate his voice. It's dark, dark blue, darker than navy, but not quite black. It makes ribbons of color dance across his vision. It's almost like his mother's, but hers moves so much more. This boy's voice hypnotized Izuku. The ribbons moved lazily, slowly rippling as if they were underwater. It's beautiful, Izuku thinks. Once he calms himself and stops laughing, Izuku straightens up and asks a different question. "What's your name?" He needs a name to go with such a voice. "Shinso Hitoshi." "Yours?" "Izuku Midoriya." They've made it to the train station by now, and Izuku suspects that they'll soon part ways. "Hey, do you have a phone?" he nearly shouts. He has to use his quirk to quiet his voice. "Yeah." Shinso pulls a phone with a cracked screen out of his pocket. May I? Izuku holds out a hand towards the phone. Shinso shrugs and unlocks the phone, before handing it to Izuku. Izuku quickly goes into his contacts and adds his own number before he closes the app and hands Shinso's phone back to him. What was that all about? You'll see, Izuku says. They make conversation while they wait for the train and say their goodbyes when the train arrives. Izuku gets on one, while Shinso waits for another. Izuku is later than he planned to be when he arrived home, and his mother was panicking. The soft black sound of footsteps could be heard throughout the apartment. Izuku! She cries out, before she pulls him into a fierce hug. Izuku wraps his arms around his mother and hugs her back as tightly as he can. What happened? I saw your note, but it's so late, she says. Her ribbon-like voice is sporadic, and the ribbons flash across Izuku's vision are frantic and random. I went to the mall like my note said, but right when I was going to leave. Izuku trails off, and Inko gives him a look that says he needs to continue this very second. There was a villain attack, he mumbles, nothing too major. Just some guy with a sound quirk, and it was all taken care of pretty quickly. Izuku's hands wave about, trying to tell Inko that he's fine, and no one got hurt. He thinks of Shinso for a moment, but he doesn't say anything. His mother frets over him only for a few minutes before she sets about making dinner. Izuku settles down to watch TV instead. The news is on, and it talks only for a few minutes about the attack. It was short-lived and there was little to no damage, so people didn't care. Dinner is eaten, and little is said. Izuku is in his bed minutes later, just begging sleep to take over. Life always has other plans though. Izuku's phone buzzed from its place on his nightstand, so he reaches over to pick it up, only to find an unknown number texting him. The first message is what makes recognition flicker in Izuku's mind, though. No. Are you alright? The question makes Izuku laugh. He knows exactly what the boy means, and it's easy to respond. You already asked that? No. Nah, you did. I only asked it once. Good point. No. Use proper punctuation, you heathen. I'm good. Izuku sets about changing the name as soon as he gets the chance. Shinso Hitoshi. I can't believe I'm conversing with such a barbarian. You do it because I'm cute. Shinso Hitoshi. Can't deny that, I guess. I gotta sleep, so I just wanted to wish you good night, I suppose. So, good night then. Good night. Izuku places his phone on the charger, only waiting a few more minutes, just in case Shinso decides he wants to say something else, before he allows himself to fall asleep. Nothing comes, and soon enough, the dark envelopes him. Izuku thinks that for Hitoshi as well, he'll become a hero. Izuku decides that if he wants to be a hero, he has to rely on more than his quirk. After all, having done some research of heroes like Eraserhead, there were most definitely people out there with quirks like that. Izuku needed to have a plan B. So then he needs to train. Needs to train his body as well as his quirk. It'd be good to have both. Of course, Izuku didn't know how to go about this. He'd never picked up a weight in his life. How are you even supposed to build up muscle mass? Especially with such a twiggy body like his. So Izuku does what Izuku does best, that is, besides seeing the world in a way that many others couldn't possibly fathom. Rather, Izuku begins to research. He scours the internet for anything he can get, including what kind of foods one needed to eat, where to start in gaining muscle, the legs, apparently, and how much he needed to train in order to gain what he needed in his self-imposed time limit. The training regimen he creates may as well be from hell itself. But hey, he's subjecting himself to all this, and it's technically for good cause. Heroics is an incredibly good cause. Shinso was becoming a constant in Izuku's life, and vice versa. Shinso had texted him one day, asking if he wanted to go to the mall and kill some time, since it was only 2 p.m. Izuku, having finished what he was doing that Saturday, had easily agreed. Maybe a bit too easily. Izuku met him at the mall at 2:30 p.m., and they had plenty of time to wander around and do nothing, since Inko didn't expect him home until 5 p.m. So, what do you want to do? Izuku asks. He has plenty of extra money, so whatever Shinso picks shouldn't be a huge problem. I dunno, Shinso shrugs, and opts to start walking, leaving Izuku to scurry behind as he tries to keep up. His newfound leg muscles don't make Shinsu's own legs any shorter. I just texted you because I was lonely and bored, I guess. Shinso stuffs his hands in his pockets, and makes a point of not looking at Izuku when he says this. Izuku frowns at this. Yes, he was likely just bored and wanted to hang out, but something seemed off. Shinsu's usually silk-smooth voice had wavered a bit. His throat croaked like he'd been crying, and the redness in his eyes solidified the theory. Izuku won't say anything for now. They're in a public space, and Izuku doubts that Shinso would want people to hear about whatever made him upset. So he'll wait. He can only hope that Shinso doesn't notice the way his lip sticks out, and his eyebrows furrow together. He's too focused on the floor anyway, so Izuku doubts he'll see. Izuku all but drags Shinso down to the food court the moment he hears the slightest rumble of his stomach. Shinso insists that it's fine, and that he's used to skipping meals once in a while. It's nothing he can't handle. As much as Izuku would love to believe that Shinso is fine, the tear marks on his face have yet to fade, and every few minutes, he can hear his breath catch in a hiccup. He still doesn't say anything. Not yet. Midoriya, really, it's alright. It's not like one missed meal will kill me, Shinso says. He's still protesting against Izuku's every attempt to buy him food. Izuku, being the bleeding heart he is, insists that he buy anyway, even when Shinso mentions that he's got money. The boy may be tall, but he's thin as it is. Izuku will not be letting him get any thinner. It's not alright, Izuku says. He nearly has to yell over the bright orange-red sound of the food court, but instead he directs the sound waves directly to Shinso. Much easier that way. You're obviously hungry, and you're not letting me buy you food. Do you see the problem here? Is the problem that I'm not accepting your charity because eventually you'll want something in return? Where'd you get that idea? Izuku asks, eyebrows furrowed in confusion yet again. Everyone always does, Shinso answers, voice quiet and assured. Izuku can still see the way his navy blue ribbons warble a bit too much when he speaks, mirroring his rough voice. Well, the only thing I'm getting in return is you, happy and not hungry, he says, very matter-of-factly. So the problem is that I'm just not accepting your charity despite the fact that I have no reason not to? Exactly, Izuku says. Now, let me buy you food. What do you want? After both had eaten, Izuku had only grabbed a small dessert, as he'd already eaten lunch. Izuku drags Shinso around the mall, where they both just window shop quite a lot. Quite a few salespeople had called them out, one of which had offered plenty of tips for Izuku and his boyfriend. Izuku promptly let go of Shinsu's hand after that, while Shinso himself doubled over in laughter. Izuku thinks he likes the way Shinso laughs. His real laugh, that is. Not the tiny chuckle he'd given him when they'd first met. Izuku stares for a moment at the way that dark satin swells and dips with each intake of breath from Shinso. Shinso, laughter finally subsiding, waved a hand in Izuku's awestruck face before he came out of it. Izuku brushed it off, and Shinso doesn't mention it again. His voice still wavers a bit, but not the way it did before, with a rough sound in his throat and a tone that made Izuku feel like Shinso was on the edge of tears. No, Shinsu's voice wavers and wobbles and cracks sometimes, because they're both teenagers, and for once in their lives they're not composed, perfect little members of the game. They're people. And if Shinso stops to stare at the candy in the window of a store, well, no one has to know that Izuku keeps that place in mind for later. Izuku ends up walking home alone, because Shinso told him multiple times that he lived in a safe neighborhood and that nothing would happen to him. Izuku still couldn't help but be a little anxious when he let him go, but Shinso pointed out that he lived quite far away from Izuku, and he'd be getting home late if he didn't board his own train right this very second. They'd parted with a short goodbye and a promise to text the other as soon as they were home and safe. Izuku is relieved to see the confirming text pop up on his phone a while later. It's the moment he's getting ready for bed that he realizes he never asked Shinso what had upset him so much. He'd seemed all right when Izuku left, and it seemed a bit late to text him about it now. Izuku decides that if anything like this comes up again, he needs to make sure that Shinso is okay first thing. Shinso Hitoshi decides that Izuku is a bleeding heart and he needs to be stopped. The poor boy had spent his money on Hitoshi. Of all people, he'd spent his demon money on him. The way he'd flushed bright red when that woman called them boyfriends, and dropped his hand almost made Hitoshi a little sad. He quite liked when people weren't afraid of him. Not yet, at least. Midoriya still had no idea what his quirk was, and Hitoshi was sure that the moment he did, he'd run away, just like everyone else. Why stick around someone that can make you do anything they want? Dad kept reminding him that his way of thinking was wrong, that there were genuine people that would come into his life, and they would stay, just because they wanted to. He always used his husband as an example, because the man was loud and wild and the exact opposite of his partner, but they'd both do anything for each other. It made him think of Midoriya for a moment, and the way he acted around Hitoshi. Sure, he spaced out quite a bit, but everyone did that once in a while. Otherwise, Midoriya was nice for no reason. He bought him food simply because Hitoshi was hungry, and that would not do at all. He dragged him around the mall and cheered him up with funny commentary and an ear ready to listen, should Hitoshi need it. He thinks of the way his dads act around each other, the way one drags the other around and tries to make him smile like it was the most important thing in the world. Perhaps it was to him. He thinks of the way that sometimes they'll go without food or sleep for days on end, and one has to force the other to lie down and rest, or to sit at the table and eat. It was always genuine. They always cared. It all clicked. Hitoshi could look at Midoriya and see that he cared in the same way. Maybe he didn't love Hitoshi like his fathers loved each other, and that was perfectly fine with him. He couldn't see himself loving Midoriya like that either, but he cared all the same, whether Hitoshi gave back or not. It still seemed silly. He never expected that anyone gave back to him, and Hitoshi half expected that it would be what got him in the end. He could only hope the boy didn't make any stupid decisions while he wasn't around. It may not be now, in this very moment, that Hitoshi realizes it. In fact, it will be a long time before it makes sense, but he'll see that, in his own ways, he cares for Midoriya as well. Izuku wakes up the next morning with a renewed sense of energy. He's up before his mother, so getting ready for the day is a quiet affair that ends with a scrawled note that's been left on the counter before he leaves to do his jogging. The mornings in this part of Muzutafu are quiet, and Izuku appreciates it quite a lot. He loves the colors that twist and move in impossible ways, but sometimes he can't help but wish that they leave for a moment or two. This morning, the only sound is Izuku's own feet on the pavement, and the baby blue twittering of birds in the trees. The UA exam is growing ever closer, and Izuku has already doubled his muscle mass, which was close to nothing in the first place. Still, he feels quite confident in his abilities. Izuku's usual route brings him past a small coffee shop, where he sees Katsuki inside, laughing at something, more likely someone, with one of his friends. Izuku makes no effort to conceal his face as he passes. Katsuki doesn't even notice. It doesn't take long for Izuku to reach the beach. The waves lap quietly at the edge of his senses, white-blue bubbles obscuring his sight, for only a moment. The beach is less of a beach and more of an improvised dump. It doesn't stink like one would think, as most of the trash is metal and rubber that had washed up on the beach from illegal dumping. Izuku had plans for this beach. He wanted to clean it up, haul the trash away, and make it usable to the public again. He doubts he has the ability to do it before UA's entrance exams, but it certainly doesn't mean he can't try. So, he sets to work. Some of the metal creaked dangerously, in white-hot streaks when he picked it up. Some of it was much too heavy for him to even go near. He nearly rejoices when he gets to his self-imposed time limit. The pile of garbage that he dragged up was nearly up to his waist. It was still on the beach, so he could easily leave it where it was and put more on it later. He'd call someone to pick it up later when he felt that it was tall enough. Izuku makes his way back home, jogging his route now. There's more noise now, the soft pink noise of people talking on their phones and to each other, and on his way through the park, he can hear the delighted red shrieks of children. It never fails to make him jump when bright red suddenly appears in his vision. Izuku gets back to the apartment in order to continue his workout indoors. He'd be horribly sore tomorrow, but at least he had the place to himself, as his mother had already left for work. That, and there was the blessed AC to protect him from the blazing sun. Izuku is just finishing his, frankly pitiful, sit-ups when he hears the bright yellow ping of his phone. He leaps up to check the notification, finding that it's from Shinso. Shinso Hitoshi. What do you want to be? It was an odd question to ask, and it took Izuku a moment to decipher its meaning. Shinso meant jobs, careers. What did he want to do with his life? I want to be a hero. What about you? Shinso Hitoshi. He's avoiding the question, of course. Izuku lets him, for now. For my friend. Disappeared a while ago. Shinso Hitoshi. I'm sorry. Izuku stares at his screen longer than he should. Something seems wrong, but he can't tell quite what. Are you okay, Shinso? Izuku waits for his answer. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. Izuku doesn't hear from Shinso again for a full 2 weeks. The first thing Izuku gets from Shinso is a cryptic message that makes Izuku think Shinso is in danger for a moment. It's not until more messages come through that he understands. Shinso Hitoshi. I think I'm a bad person. The message scares Izuku half to death until he feels his phone vibrate in his grip. Shinso Hitoshi. I've been ignoring you, and I'm sorry about that. I was just scared to talk for a bit. I'm figuring some things out, and the people around me don't help too much. If you'd like to meet up and just hang out to make up for all my bullshit, then just text me when you get the chance. Izuku feels like he'll cry. This boy honestly thought he was obligated to text Izuku when he obviously felt upset. Of course, they were going to meet up, but Izuku easily decided that Shinso would be picking. He didn't want to make him uncomfortable in a place he didn't like. Don't worry about it. We can meet up if you want to. Just pick a place you like and I'll meet you there. 5 minutes later. Shinso sends him the address of a tiny little cafe that Izuku's seen maybe twice. He leaves a note for his mother again, and is on the train to the prefecture in only a few minutes. Hitoshi does not want to tell Midoriya anything. Midoriya is kind and pure, and he'd likely die for a complete stranger before he did anything for himself. He doesn't want to lose a friend like that, but it would do him no good to be hiding things. He had to tell him. He gets to the cafe last, surprisingly. He must have left the house a bit late. Hey, Shinso! Midoriya shouts. He counts himself lucky that there's almost no one there. Hey, Hitoshi says quietly. He sits down at the table across from Midoriya. So, I've been needing to talk to you, I suppose, he mumbles. Okay, Midoriya is calmer now. He looks like he wants to say something, but he's trying to keep his mouth shut. Perhaps it's for the best. In the 4 months that they've now known each other, the topic of careers had only come up once, and that had been Hitoshi's out-of-the-blue text. Midoriya had no idea about his aspirations, and while he might know about his quirk, he doesn't know the specifics. I think I've been hiding some things that you should know, he says. For starters, my quirk. What's wrong with it? Hitoshi has to stop to compose himself. It's called brainwashing. It lets me mind control anyone that answers something I say. Midoriya doesn't seem sure what to say for a moment, before a smile breaks out on his face. Is that all, Shinso? That's not bad. It's actually great. Imagine what you could do with that. He's only gotten that reaction once before, and it still didn't have the same enthusiasm Midoriya gave him. That's the other thing, he says. I want to be a hero, so I plan on going to UA. So, Midoriya says, I'm not seeing what's wrong here. You don't, my quirk though. Hitoshi hisses. Your quirk is perfect for heroics. Midoriya absent-mindedly waves away a hostess as he speaks. She looks a bit annoyed at him. I mean, you'd be able to apprehend criminals with little to no public damage, and it'd be easy to get civilians away from dangerous situations. The only thing you'd need to do was rile them up enough to get them to respond. He finally ends his spiel by picking up a menu and looking it over. So, if that's what this is all about, you have nothing to worry about except the entrance exams. Hitoshi is stunned. Normally he'd be told to go away, delete their number from their phone, and never speak to them again. Midoriya? He seemed almost excited at the prospect of Hitoshi wanting to go into heroics. Well yeah, that's it, Hitoshi says. Normally I don't get that kind of reaction. Sorry for being so worried about it. Don't be. It's okay. I was kind of rude about it. Hitoshi resists the urge to squint at Midoriya. Midoriya is Izuku, nicest person on earth. Rude? He doubts it, even if his way of pointing it out was a little blunt. Just order your food. I'm paying this time and you can't refuse. Izuku offers to let Shinso work out with him. Shinso, of course, refuses. He says he gets enough training bullshit from his dad. That's enough to make him worry for a moment, before Shinso insists that his father is trying to help him, because he knows he wants to be in the hero course. He's still suspicious, but it's enough for now. On the other hand, he does agree to help him clean up the beach. Izuku knows this is a project that will follow him into at least his first month of high school, but that's perfectly fine by his standards. Shinso had just recently helped him get 2 large piles up by the road, and Izuku is busy trying to call the garbage company to pick it up. They've only got another month before UA now, and both of them are a bit stressed. They've both been cramming practice exams into their schedules whenever possible, and Izuku's own schedule has been taken up by training and cleaning up the beach as well. There was barely time for either of them to sleep anymore. The sound of Shinso dragging over another microwave oven brings him out of his thoughts. He can barely stand the white-hot sound anymore. If he hears the sound of metal on concrete ever again, it would be much too soon. He's finally finished the call, and now all they have to do is sit around and wait for the truck, which should be where they were in about 20 minutes. Hey, Shinso, do you want to get something to eat after the truck gets here? He asks, stuffing his phone in his pocket. God, yes. Shinso is lying in the sand, eyes closed and breath heavy. First of all, how do you do this every day? I couldn't at first. Practice, I guess. Secondly, stop calling me Shinso. I think we've known each other long enough that you can call me Hitoshi. All right, Hitoshi, the name feels strange on his tongue, but he likes it all the same. You can call me Izuku then. Okay, Izuku. 1 month later, Izuku is walking up to UA's giant front gate, with Hitoshi at his side. The crowd is neon blue and pastel pink, and Izuku's almost scared that someone will yell too loud and ruin it. Of course, it's Katsuki that does this for him. Izuku had only been babbling to Hitoshi about the school's architecture and the way the colors, despite being a bit gaudy, really did complement the overall shape of the building. Hitoshi, who knew nothing about architecture, was listening with little interest. He just liked to hear Izuku talk sometimes. Katsuki had no one to talk to, and had every chance to look where he was going. In fact, he was watching exactly where he was going, when he shoved Izuku to the side, and into Hitoshi with his shoulder. FNG, watch it, nerd. Hey Dash, don't worry about it, Hitoshi. He's just in butt. Izuku paid no attention to Katsuki. Katsuki hated him, though he didn't know why, and Izuku tried to stay away from Katsuki. That was just how it worked, and Hitoshi didn't need to get involved in that. They both walked into the building, where someone would explain the practical exams to them, before they took them. The examiner turned out to be President FNG Mike. Izuku was rather excited. He'd always admired the man to an extent, so it was huge for Izuku. Hitoshi just looked mortified that the hero even existed. He'd ask about that later. The test was to be robots. Izuku winced because maybe a supersonic scream could take one of those out, but mind control most definitely could not. One boy in front of them stood up to ask a question about the 4th robot on their paper, and to call Izuku out for mumbling so loud. Izuku could only look at Hitoshi in betrayal, as he'd never stopped him. Hitoshi only shrugged. Well, right you are, listener. The 4th robot is a bit of an obstacle. It gives you no points, and it's not recommended that you fight it, President Mike yells, as he gestures wildly to the screen where a 4th graphic had appeared. Well, this is it, listeners. You'll be loaded onto buses and taken to the exam sites. Izuku and Hitoshi won't be in the same exam site, but it's likely for the best. Hitoshi wants to be a hero on his own power, so Izuku's urge to help him would do neither of them any good. The two part ways with a promise to tell each other how it went later. The gate is huge. It's more than 50 times as tall as Izuku, and he can't help but wonder how big the robots were if the gate were this big. Of course, he's scolded again for mumbling and bothering other examinees, even though that wasn't what he was trying to do, by the same person at that. The gate opens and no one moves at all. What are you waiting for? Real battles don't have a countdown. Now go! Everyone surges forwards, and Izuku almost trips over himself as he's shoved to the side by someone else. The robots are gigantic. It seemed he'd never escape the bright, sharp, debilitating noise of metal on stone. The claws on the robots were too small to support it properly, so its legs slid against the concrete in a flash of white that blocked Izuku's vision. For now though, he couldn't focus on that. He had to destroy these things. Izuku runs off into a side alley and around a fake building, where a 3-pointer awaits. Perfect. Izuku takes the neon sound of his voice, and he forces the waves to grow, until the robot falls apart under his sound. He sees an examinee nearby clutching at their ears, and he can't help but feel guilty. They're up in seconds though, and running away to get a different robot. That's how it goes for a while. Izuku's got a whole 23 points when the ground begins to rumble. He's close. Much too close to the thing that comes out of the ground. The 0-pointer. People screamed as they ran from it, and Izuku was prepared to as well, until he heard a cry for help. That cry was even closer to the behemoth than he was, and Izuku was turned around and running towards it in seconds. It's a girl trapped under the rubble, struggling to reach for it behind her. The dilemma is clear, and if he screams, she'll get caught in the blast, but it's a risk he'll have to take. Cover your ears, he yells. He waits until she does so, and he lets loose the loudest sound he can muster. The sound that took out 2 buildings. The 0-pointer shuddered, as its limbs loosened and its body fell to pieces. It takes all his energy to make sure it falls backwards, where everybody had already run away. He can barely hear the buzzer signaling the end of the test over his own screaming, and when he does, he finally stops to rest. He's about to collapse on the ground, but the girl is still trapped, and he'd rather not leave her like that. He stumbles forwards to see if she needs help getting out. She looks dazed, likely from his screaming, but otherwise, she's okay. Are you all right? Izuku asks. Yeah, just. She reaches for a piece of rubble behind her. Can you move that towards my hand? Izuku nods and carefully slides it towards her. She hits the rubble with her hand, and gravity is completely negated as the concrete lifts itself into the air. She climbs out of the rubble, unscathed for the most part. There are only a few scratches on her, and she looks like she'll be fine. Izuku takes this as an okay for him to nearly collapse on the ground beside her. She fusses over him for a moment, before he waves her off and tells her he'll be fine. It's just quirk backlash after all. It's not like he'll die. He's sitting on the ground next to her, throat sore and quirk exhausted. Even if he'd used his quirk to enlarge the sound waves, he still screamed loud enough to hurt his voice. A little old lady walks around, handing vitamin gummies to examinees, and kisses where needed. It's easy to see that she's the famous hero, recovery girl. Are you all right, young man? You didn't rupture your vocal cords, did you? She asks him. I don't think so, ma'am. Despite the rough sound of his voice, he's not in too much pain. He only has a terrible headache from the noise, and having to focus on the waves so long. He keeps his eyes closed, blocking out the colored waves from the objects around him. Shapes still flash behind his eyelids, as the girl speaks with a bubbly, pink voice. It makes him cringe a bit. It's so similar but still, not quite the same. He feels guilty that he's relieved when she stops talking. In another room, far away from the exam sites, multiple faculty members cover their ears, as a loud blonde expresses his excitement for the takedown of the 0-pointer. It's another week before he gets the results. He and Hitoshi had been talking over the phone quite a bit, going over their performance in the exams. Hitoshi seemed sure that he'd gotten into the general course, but Izuku reminds him to not lose hope. There might be something else they hadn't told the examinees. Hitoshi refuses to get his hopes up and insists that Izuku had to have gotten into the hero course. After all, he'd taken out plenty of robots, as well as the 0-pointer. If that didn't count for something, then Hitoshi was sure that UA was sheet, and that they should just take the later entrance exams for Shiketsu. No. Shiketsu's exams could be the same, and UA is one of the few schools that allows students to transfer from the general course to the hero course. There's still hope. Izuku says. So you do admit that I'll get into general studies? Hitoshi laments. Hitoshi, Izuku draws out the vowels childishly. Hitoshi is just being a pessimist, as always. Hold on, the sound of a door opening and muffled voices is heard, before Hitoshi comes back. My dad just brought in the mail. The UA letter just came in. I'm gonna hang up for a minute, alright? Okay. Izuku says, call me back with the results. Hitoshi hangs up without a word, but it's simply his way. He'll call back in a few minutes. Izuku looks at the envelope sitting on his desk. He hadn't wanted to open it until Hitoshi got his, so it seemed now was the time. He carefully opened the envelope, and a small metal disc falls out on his desk. He stares at the disc for a moment, before light and noise pops up, causing Izuku to fall back. Hello. A dark gold, booming voice appears. It is I, All Might. I'll be teaching at UA this year. Izuku had no knowledge of this information, but that made plenty of sense. They likely didn't want the media hounding UA and All Might about it. So, Midoriya Izu, All Might reads off of a card in his hand, your results in the entrance exam were astounding. You already had 30 points before the 0-pointer appeared. You may have not made it into the hero course, considering that there are limited spots, and you just barely passed the cutoff. That is, if that were all that there was to the exam. What do you mean? How many more of these do I have to do? Ah sheesh, alright. All Might bickers with a mahogany voice off-screen. Anyway, another aspect of the exam was rescue points. With your destruction of the 0-pointer, you came out of the exam with 90 points, the highest of any examinee. You've made it. Welcome, Midoriya, to your hero academia. All Might finishes his speech, and the hologram cuts off. Izuku almost wants to cry. Almost, but his phone rings first. The caller ID tells him it's Hitoshi, and he's quick to answer. Hitoshi, how'd you do? Izuku asks. I didn't get into the hero course, Hitoshi says. The dark blue ribbons jump a bit, and Izuku can hear the way his voice cracks easily. I did get into general, though. It's not completely hopeless. Izuku wants to reach out to hug him, even if he can't see him at the moment. You can work your way up. It would make you more worthy than any of the hero course students. Izuku tries to encourage him. Judging by the way Hitoshi laughs, it may have worked. Anyway, what about you? Have you even gotten your letter? Yes. Izuku doesn't say much more. So, how'd you do? He debates whether or not telling Hitoshi would make him sad, before deciding that the truth is always the best. I got into the hero course dash. IFNG knew it. You owe me sweets, Hitoshi interrupts. Wait, there's more. What did you do? Nothing. Kind of. I slid into first place with 90 points. Izuku's voice de-escalates, until it's not much more than a whisper. Hitoshi is silent for a moment that Izuku deems much too long. You fucker. His voice explodes from the speaker. I can't believe. Izuku almost thinks he's mad for a minute, before Hitoshi reminds him of just how much power he has. And you thought you might not make it into the hero course. You destroyed the FING robot. Of course they'd account for that. Hitoshi dash, he's cut off again as Hitoshi continues on his rant, telling him off for even thinking of doubting himself. Hitoshi, I dash, again, words are no use. He has to hang up on Hitoshi and immediately call him back to get him to shut up. I didn't know I was in first place until a few minutes ago. Apparently there was more to the test than just destroying robots, he explains. That explains a bit. What do you mean? I had 10 points despite not destroying anything. I wondered why, but the letter they sent me didn't explain. The statement definitely confuses Izuku. Why had Hitoshi gotten a letter, but he'd gotten a full hologram? You got a letter? Yeah. You didn't. Kind of. They sent this weird little disc, and a hologram popped out of it. That's what you get for being a hero student? Hitoshi laughs. It's another week before high school actually begins. His uniform had come in, and his mother was fussing over every little thing. You've got all your supplies, right? She asks. Yes, Mom dash. And your earplugs? Yes dash. You didn't forget your phone, did you? I've got everything, Mom. Izuku says, perhaps a bit too loud, because Inko backs off for a moment. Sorry, Izuku mumbles. He rarely raises his voice, and it's even more rare that he raises it to his mother, but he's nervous, and while it's no excuse, his mother's hounding had frustrated him. It's all right, dear, Inko says, brushing the hair out of his face. Just stay safe today. I'm sure you'll do great. Inko waves him off, and Izuku makes his way to the train station, where he shies away from any other students he might have seen. The tall boy from the exam had been intimidating, and Izuku felt a bit grateful that he hadn't encountered him. Izuku steps off of the train a few minutes later and texts Hitoshi. He still has to walk quite a bit, which was why he had gotten up so early. Hitoshi was supposed to meet him at the station. Soon enough, another train pulled up, with a tall, indigo-haired teen as one of its passengers. Hitoshi steps off and easily finds Izuku in the crowd. There were times when Izuku found Hitoshi's height dimming, especially when he wanted to play pranks, but at least he didn't have to hop around for Hitoshi to find him. Hey! Hi, Hitoshi. Are you excited? Izuku asks. A bit, but mostly nervous, Hitoshi says. Honestly, I'm scared. This is UA after all. Why'd they even accept me in the first place? He mumbles the last bit to himself. Multiple reasons. Izuku tries to reassure Hitoshi. First of all, you applied for the general course, and your grades were good enough for them to notice. UA's focus may be heroics, but the name still holds weight when it comes to other subjects. Secondly, they must have seen potential in you, so they didn't outright reject you from the school altogether. You can still graduate from the general course and into heroics. Lastly, you wanted it so bad that the universe had to give it to you. That's a dumb reason, Hitoshi says. And what reason do they have to reject you? Izuku bites back. My quirk dash. Nope. Bad reason. Izuku is quick to cut Hitoshi off. Izuku, not everyone thinks of my quirk the same way you do. No, I mean, if they didn't accept you on the basis of your quirk, they'd get sued, Izuku points out. Wait, what? Quirk discrimination is illegal, and UA would have to tell you why they rejected you if they did. They'd give you a bullshit reason that makes no sense, and it would soon be taken to court, depending on who knew. Hitoshi doesn't say anything else until they get to the school. I'll see you after school, Hitoshi says. Okay, I'll see you later. The two split ways, and the moment they do, their troubles begin. Hitoshi is quickly singled out in his class, despite everyone's quirks being even less powerful than his own. Some pretty girl, whose quirk was simply to change her eye color, had sneered at him during introductions, which had consisted of going around the room and telling everyone your name, quirk, and middle school. He mentally catalogs everyone's quirks, and finds that most are passive quirks, or something that only affects their appearance. Nothing too powerful, save for a girl in the back of the class, who could insert her consciousness into another person's body. She, too, gets a lot of looks from their classmates, but unlike Hitoshi, she seems to wither under their glares. Class starts, and they're soon in orientation. Class 1A is missing, but the principal ignores it and moves on with the orientation anyway. Hitoshi can only hope that Izuku is doing better than him. Izuku is doing terribly. Katsuki is in his class, being ruthlessly scolded by the tall, straight-laced boy from the exams. The very same girl from the exams, the one with the bubbly voice that made him want to scream at her, had surprised him when she called out him. He could only hide his face when the tall boy walks up to introduce himself. Izuku wants to call him Blue, because of the overwhelming robin's egg blues and navies and everything in between that took over his voice in straight, even lines. He's Ida Tenya, and the girl is Uraraka Ochako. He tries to focus on the way her name sounds, with the sharp K and short RS, rather than the way her voice looks when she says it. He feels bad about it. He wants to avoid her. Her voice is almost the same, save for the pink tint to her bubbles, rather than the golden tone Tsubasa's had had. Still, it's much too close. He's still thankful that Katsuki keeps his mouth shut for once, though. Hey, what's your name? Her voice calls out. Izuku is still hiding behind his hands when he answers her. Izuku Midoriya, he says. Well, Midoriya, I'd just like to say, she starts off calmly, before the bubbles pop and her voice explodes. The way you took out the 0-pointer was so cool. How'd you do that? Wait, Ida interjects. You were the student that took out the 0-pointer? Yes, Izuku mumbles. My quirk lets me. Izuku trails off, trying to find a way to explain it. You know how sounds and colors make waves? He gets 2 nods as confirmation. My quirk lets me control those waves. I can make sounds as loud or as soft as I want, and I can choose which colors bounce off of an object to control its color, he explains. Though, that part isn't very useful, except for stealth, I guess, but I haven't really tried that before. It's a very versatile quirk, Ida exclaims. I'm sure it'd be a valuable asset in the field. Izuku is about to respond, when he'd interrupted by a slow, dark voice. Why aren't you in your seats? Go, you aren't here to make friends, it says. Izuku turns to see a man in a sleeping bag, with a face that almost makes Izuku think it's Hitoshi. It's the hair that convinces him otherwise. Where Hitoshi's hair is wild in a way that makes him stand out in a crowd, this man's hair makes him look like he's never seen a hairbrush. The bags under his eyes only add to the tired and disheveled look. It took you a full 8 seconds to shut your mouths. We'll work on that. He drops the sleeping bag and reveals a black jumpsuit, along with some strange bandages underneath. I'm your teacher. You can call me Aizawa-sensei. Take these. He throws a bunch of uniforms in their direction, each separated by a plastic bag with a name on it. The students dig through until everyone has a uniform in their hands. Go change into those. Meet me at the training grounds. You've got 10 minutes, he spares a glance towards them as he leaves. Anyone that's late gets expelled. With that, everyone rushes to the locker rooms to get changed. Soon enough, they're on the training grounds with Aizawa-sensei. 8 minutes. You need to be faster in the future, he says. He's tossing a ball back and forth in his hands. Sir, why are we out here? Ida calls out. Yeah, aren't we supposed to be in orientation? Uraraka asks. UA is very lenient in its teaching styles. I think this time is better spent teaching than being introduced to the principal, Aizawa says. Now. Midoriya, Izuku tenses at the sound of his name. You made the highest score in the exam. Take this. He throws the ball at Izuku, who fumbles to catch it. Everyone gapes a bit when they hear that he made the highest score. What was your middle school throwing average? Aizawa asks. Izuku has to think for a minute. 48 meters, I think. Good, now use your quirk, Aizawa says. Stand in the circle. I don't care what you do, as long as you don't move out of it. Aizawa directs him to a chalk circle on the ground. Izuku enters the chalk barrier and tosses the ball in the air to test its weight. He rears his arm back and throws the ball, ready to send a scream after it in order to make it go further. Only to find that he can't. All that comes out is a pathetic yell, and suddenly, everything is too still. His classmates are murmuring behind him, but he can't see their voices. It's all too still. The colors are gone. He looks to Aizawa to find the man's hair standing on end and his eyes glowing red. He's scared of this feeling the man is giving him. He hates it. It feels horrible. Please, he says, his voice quiet, give it back. He doesn't quite register what he says. All he knows is that something is gone and that's what's causing this horrible feeling. And as quickly as it was gone, it's back. He can see the loud blue voice of Ida and the soft green tones of a girl he can't see. Try not to destroy everyone's hearing. What you did at the entrance exam was reckless. I'm sure you could do better, Aizawa says, throwing him a sharp glare. Izuku nods and stands in the circle yet again, readying himself. Perhaps redirect the waves. He'd have to be careful, but it could work. That would have to do for now. He throws the ball, form bad, and throw sloppy, but it doesn't matter when Izuku screams. His peers don't hear it. He redirects the sound waves to go directly to the ball, vibrations making it waver in the air, before it shoots off, faster than before. The ball lands far away, and he can't quite see it. 608.7 meters, Aizawa says, holding up a device for Izuku to see. Before, they wouldn't let you use your quirks. Personally, I think it's inefficient. Today, you'll be going through the same tests with the use of your quirks, he explains. This sounds kind of fun, says a girl in the back. Fun? Aizawa interjects. Izuku winces at the malice in his voice. If you think this is for fun, then you can leave now. You came here to be heroes, not have fun. Just for that, let's add a rule. We'll rank it, and whoever comes in last will be expelled. The entire class bristles at this. But sir, it's only the first day. We've barely done a thing, you can't expel us now. This is hardly fair. Colors swirl about at the cacophony. Shut up, he says. I can and I will. Now line up. You're all doing the ball throw first. The event is interesting at the least. Izuku gets to see all his classmates' quirks in action and use his own. Many of them find creative ways to use their quirks to excel in the exercises, and while Izuku can't do much for the grip test, he does get to see the way one classmate consumes a pack of sugar before placing first in the exercise, or the way that another bounces back and forth using little groups of ball on either side of him for the side jump. The sprint test is easier, and it's simple to use the sound waves to propel himself farther than Katsuki. At the end of the day, an invisible girl named Hagakure Toru is in last place. She's quite despaired, and breaks down in tears as the girls around her comfort her, all while glaring at Aizawa, along with quite a few of the boys. Calm yourselves. Hagakure, you're not getting expelled, he says, at which point the girls sniffles lessen. I'm not? She asks. Izuku feels glad that he can see her pastel green voice smooth out, as her words start to crack a bit less. No. It was a logical ruse, he says. I said that so that you would all do your best. The students already glaring at him glare harder. You lied to us, shouts Ida. Even in the name of bettering us, it was extremely unethical. It should have been obvious, says a darker voice, gray and blanket-like. It's only the first day, and he'd have no reason to expel any of us, she points out. The students mumble amongst themselves in agreement as Aizawa redirects them back to the classroom. Izuku endures the English PRD, where present mix's sharp, bright yellow voice pierces the ears of everyone in the room. Only a few times does he grasp the yellow bolts in his mind and force them a bit smaller. He can see the way that everyone around him relaxes. Izuku is thankful when lunch rolls around, and he finds Hitoshi already sitting at a table in the corner, staring at his plate in what seemed to be indecision. Hitoshi! Hey! He calls out. He sets his tray down next to Hitoshi. Hi, Izuku, he says before finally deciding to take a bite of his food. So, where was your class during orientation? Oh, our teacher didn't think it was necessary, so he ran some tests with us instead, Izuku explains. Weird, he hums and starts shoveling noodles into his mouth. Apparently, they were good. Yeah, he thought it was a waste of our time apparently. Any other conversation is brought to an abrupt halt by a very loud, very obvious teacher who had no concept of subtlety. Hey, listeners! Present Mike shouts. It takes Izuku a moment to quiet his voice as he sees Hitoshi wince. You're Midoriya Izuku, right? The man shouts. Izuku has to fight that petty side of himself that wants to match his volume. Yes, he barely has the word out before Present Mike is talking again. Awesome. Can I ask about your quirk, listener? It just looks so similar to mine, and I couldn't help but get excited. He says. Oh, of course it's about his quirk. It's been all about his quirk today. Maybe it will be better tomorrow. It's called wave control. It allows me to control sound and light waves, Izuku says quietly. Present Mike is quiet for only a moment, before he explodes in a burst of sharp yellows and gold. That's even better than mine, little listener. That's incredible, in fact. The man waves his arms about carelessly, quite nearly hitting Hitoshi, before Aizawa quite suddenly appears behind him, using his odd scarf to silence the man, as his eyes glowed red, and his hair floated above his head. For the love of God, Hizashi, they're trying to eat, Aizawa says. He drags the other hero away, as Present Mike throws Izuku a thumbs up. The moment the two were gone, Izuku turns to Hitoshi again. That was our homeroom teacher, he says. He looks familiar, and so does his quirk, but I can't quite place my finger on it. Present Mike. Hitoshi asks, he's my homeroom teacher, Izuku. No, the other one. Oh, Hitoshi pauses for a moment. That was Eraserhead, dummy. I showed you a couple videos before, remember? Wait, that's the underground hero you were so excited about? Izuku asks. Yes. Holy F dash. Izuku ends up walking Hitoshi to the train station, making light conversation along the way. He's the first to leave, while Izuku has to wait for his train a bit longer. The day was interesting, at least. Eraserhead teaching at UA was a bit scary to Izuku, because the man was known to be logical and emotionless. At least, that's from what little was known of him. He hoped there would be no more logical ruses, but seeing what he had pulled with the quirk assessment, and what Izuku could tell about his personality, there would be more. He does regret not speaking too much with his classmates, though. If there were a team exercise of any sort, he likely wouldn't know how to interact with them. After all, Tsubasa had long since disappeared, and Katsuki hated him. The white-hot screech of the train pulling up pulled Izuku out of his thoughts, so he boarded the train and left questions for tomorrow. So maybe Hitoshi was right. Mornings are stupid and never should have existed in the first place. Of course, Izuku wakes up nonetheless, because he has to go to school if he wants to be a hero, and he wants to be a hero, so school it is. Izuku picks up his phone and scowls at the bright screen, before he sees the multitude of messages Hitoshi had sent him. Shinso Hitoshi. Are you awake? It's 3 a.m. I forgot you sleep like a normal person. Anyway, I'm just bored, and you know when I'm bored and it's 3 in the morning. I think too much. Distract me. Take melatonin, you idiot. Izuku is greeted with a snarky reply a few minutes later on the train. Shinso Hitoshi. Sorry, don't have any. Let me just take my invisible sleepy time pills. I'm already on the train, but next time I see you, I'm bringing a full bottle. Shinso Hitoshi. Oh shit. He used proper punctuation. Izuku snorts and tucks his phone away in his bag, just as the train opens its doors. Hitoshi's train is a bit earlier than usual, so Izuku's wait isn't as long as before. Hitoshi finds Izuku and slings an arm around his shoulders, leaning his full weight on him. This isn't fair, Hitoshi. Izuku jokes. Sorry, too tired to stand. Couldn't find my invisible sleep pills, he deadpants. Eventually, they stop messing around and are on their way to UA, when a pink girl in a UA uniform comes bounding towards them. Hey, you're Midoriya, right? She shouts. Her voice matches the rest of her, pink and hyper. It bounces around too much for Izuku to keep his eyes on it. Well, yes, he says. Hitoshi is already glaring at the girl for being so loud so early in the morning. I don't think I can remember your name. Sorry. It's fine. I never introduced myself. There's 2 boys walking up behind her, a blonde, along with the blue boy from the day before. I'm Ishido Mina, she says, before being promptly tackled by the blonde. And I'm Kaminari Denki. Hitoshi glares at him too. I believe we've already met, Midoriya-san, Ida shouts. Hitoshi is glaring fiercely at all 4 of them, though Izuku could tell it was only jokingly. Yo, who are you? Kaminari asks, looking up to Hitoshi. Shinso Hitoshi, he mumbles. Kaminari sticks out his tongue, seemingly in thought, before turning around and whispering something to Ishido. Ishido laughs, like Kaminari had just told her a secret. We need to get to class, Ida shouts, again, much too loud for this early in the morning. Yeah, what he said, Hitoshi mutters, before taking Izuku by the hand and dragging him along with his long strides. It's normal. It's always normal. Up until hero studies. All Might bursts through the door in all his heroic prowess, and the classroom erupts in noise, Izuku included. He doesn't even attempt to quiet his classmates. I am coming through the door, like a normal person. The man yells. Izuku cringes at the bright yellow color that invades his vision. Despite his lack of calm or subtlety, Izuku can't help but feel starstruck when he sees him. He'd never really been the biggest fan of heroes, more interested in music and the complex ways that light moved, but when meeting someone like All Might, who's incredibly powerful and larger than life. Even if you hate the man, you'd at least feel intimidated. Hello, students. You all know who I am. Of course they did. Even hermits that lived in caves knew All Might, and I'm here today to teach your foundational hero studies class. Now, he presses a button on a remote, and multiple drawers pop out of the wall with a mechanical sound. Go get your costumes and meet me on ground beta. Each student rushes for their costumes, and Izuku eventually finds his own amongst all the chaos. He follows the rest of the boys to the locker room, where he can finally evaluate the costume the support company had made for him. His mother had offered her support, but despite her excellent sewing skills, they had both decided it was better to just send his design in instead. It was loud at the least. Izuku had a black spandex suit that went underneath the costume itself, with pads sewn into the suit for extra protection. The costume was another story entirely. The top half consisted of a green jacket that went over a lighter t-shirt. A pair of light brown cargo pants went on next, before his helmet and belt. He made sure to have a few noise-making devices in the design, should he be unable to use his voice. The belt included 4 speakers hanging off of it. If he turned the speakers on with nothing connected to them, they'd give him a light gray static noise, which he could amplify and change pitch at will. He can't change a sound in its entirety yet, but he's working on it, and white noise was the easiest to work with. He left the locker room just before a few other boys, one of which being Kaminari. He seemed to go for the functionality over looks approach as well, judging by the battery-filled pouches on the waistband of his pants and the communication device over his ear. Hey Midoriya. Speak of the devil and he shall appear. Your costume looks pretty cool. The speakers and stuff are for your quirk, right? Yes. Yeah. I can't weaponize colors very effectively unless I were aiming to confuse my enemy, so sound is one of my few weapons, Izuku says. And the batteries? For your quirk, I assume. Yep. Kaminari says, popping the P at the end of the word, it lets me store up electricity, but if I use too much at once, I go dumb for a while. The batteries are so I can get my energy back up faster. Smart. The two make their way to the training grounds with idle chatter. Ashido jumps over to talk animatedly about how they could have at least made their costumes look nice, while retaining functionality when they make it to the area. Midoriya, I kind of expected this from you. I don't know why, but I did, but Kaminari, really? She scolds. You could have put a bit more effort into the lightning bolts at the least. Come on, Ashido. You look like a colorblind cheetah. Do you have any right to criticize us? Ashido mocks an offended look, and is about to retaliate against Kaminari, when All Might finally appears. Hello students. You're all looking good in your costumes. The man gives them all a thumbs up. Now, as for the lesson today, most of the time, what you see on TV about villains is the cleanup, and sometimes a battle, but most fights take place indoors. That's why you'll be holding mock battles inside some of these buildings today. All Might gestures to the fake city behind him. Now, you'll be fighting in teams with one hero team and one villain team. The villain team will be protecting a fake explosive device inside the building, and the heroes need to apprehend the villains and the device. There are a few ways to win. If one team captures both members of the other team, the first team will win. If the hero team touches the explosive, they win. Lastly, if the villain team lasts to the end of the trial without the explosive being taken, the villain team wins. You'll each be given a roll of capture tape, which you will use to apprehend the other team. Teams will be chosen by lots. He gestures to the box next to him, and each team will get a chance to be both hero and villain, so be prepared for anything. Sir, why are you choosing the teams by lots? Wouldn't that give some teams an unfair advantage? There it is. Izuku could tell that Ida's dark blue voice was missing. Well, Yaoyorozu starts. In real life, plenty of hero teams have to team up at the last minute. It would make sense that we do so randomly, because we often won't have a choice. I see, Ida says. I apologize for interrupting. Carry on, sir. Thank you, young Ida. Young Yaoyorozu is right. All Might almost seems thankful that she brought it up. Many heroes do have to team up on the fly when it comes to villain fights, so this will help you get used to that in a way. But it's time to draw lots. All Might holds out a box, and each student takes a small ping-pong ball with a letter printed on it out. As soon as it's said and done, All Might calls out the teams. Team A is Ida and Uraraka, Team B is Ashido and Kirishima, Team C is Todoroki and Shuji, Team D is Midoriya and Kaminari, Izuku only rejoices that it's not Katsuki, and while he doesn't know Kaminari that well, he's still comfortable with him. Team E is Bakugo and Mineta, Team F is Yaoyorozu and Toru, Team G is Jairu and Siro, Team H is Azui and Kuda, Team I is Satu and Aoyama, and Team J is Tokoyami and Ojiro. He finally finishes. And now, for the first trial, Team B will be heroes, and Team G will be villains. Siro and Jairu enter the building to prepare for the heroes, while Kirishima and Ishido wait outside and throw plans back and forth. Neither of them have anything solid, but they're getting somewhere at the least. All of the other students have been stuffed into an observation room. 10 minutes pass, and All Might announces that the hero team can go inside. Ishido, surprisingly enough, calmly walks inside next to Kirishima. Another screen shows Jairu with one earphone jack in the wall, relaying information to Siro, who is currently taping the papier-mâché bomb to the ceiling. Both teams have good chances, considering that none of them are long-range fighters, save for maybe Siro, and that their quirks aren't clear counters to the others, again with the exception of Ishido's acid versus Siro's tape. As it turns out, there really wasn't much of an epic battle. Kirishima was caught by Siro's tape, and even in his hardened form, Ishido would have burned him. He was left behind, while Siro attempted to capture Ishido. He, of course, kept failing due to the potent sheen of acid on Ishido's skin. She made it up the stairs, before she was stopped by Jairu, along with the fact that she simply couldn't reach the bomb. She was captured fairly quickly, and the villain team was declared winner. All four walked into the observation room, two of which had a dejected look on their faces. Now, can anyone tell us what went wrong there? All Might asks, prompting a hushed discussion amongst the class. The pastel pink noise of the people around him whispering is quickly becoming one of his favorite sounds. Hey, Midoriya, what do you think happened? Kaminari asks. Well, Kirishima could have been more careful about watching his surroundings. Then Siro wouldn't have gotten the drop on him. Ishido actually did alright, except that when she saw that she couldn't reach the bomb, she just gave up, rather than trying another solution. Izuku dissolves into mumbling. Wow. You're good at this, Kaminari says. Soon enough, a thorough explanation is provided, and the next teams are called out. Team A as heroes, and Team I as villains. That battle was over in a flash. Aoyama was taken out of the running by Uraraka, who sent him into the air and wrapped the tape around him, and Ida took down Satu as soon as his sugar wore off. Nothing very exciting had happened just yet, but the commentary for this battle was extensive, as Yaoyorozu seemed intent on roasting Aoyama and his lack of observational skills. Thankfully, she couldn't rant forever, and the next teams were called. Team D as heroes, oh, so they were next. And Team E as villains. Well, they were utterly effed. Izuku's face turns white. At least, that's what Izuku assumes, based on how Kaminari is looking at him. Hey man, are you alright? Izuku shakily nods his head, and makes his way to the front of the building. Bakugo and Mineta have already made their way inside. Alright, so what's up? As soon as All Might called out the teams, you freaked, Kaminari says. I know Katsuki. Izuku stops as he tries to find the word. He doesn't play nice, to say the least. Oh. Yeah. Anyway, this could work in our favor, Izuku says. Katsuki will come after me because he hasn't met you, so he can't be mad at you, and Mineta's quirk should be fairly easy for you to handle. We've got this. I'll just avoid Katsuki, and you find the bomb. Are you sure? Don't get me wrong, the plans sound fine, but... Kaminari stops and fiddles with his earpiece. I don't want you to get hurt just because of some battle trial. Bakugo already sounds like an but. Don't worry, I'll be fine, Izuku says. He hopes Kaminari can't hear the way his voice shakes. Okay, All Might announces that they can go in, and Kaminari gives him a thumbs up and wishes him luck, before they walk in. It's maybe 2 minutes before Katsuki finds them, and Izuku yells at Kaminari to go. It would only make sense to split up at this point. Immediately, Katsuki lunges at him, palms visibly heating up as he grabs at Izuku. It's a close thing, but Izuku flips the switch on one of his speakers and the space is filled with gray, splotchy noise. Katsuki falls to the ground as Izuku increases the volume, bit by bit, leaving Katsuki in his own little bubble of debilitating sound as Izuku leaves the area. It will be a few minutes before Katsuki gets up again, but Izuku will be ready. Well, he would have been ready. Kaminari hasn't updated him on the situation, so he doesn't know how he's doing. He debates calling Kaminari to ask when Katsuki gets the drop on him. Katsuki takes the chance to destroy the speakers on his belt, and Izuku counts his blessings because Katsuki doesn't go straight for his throat. Izuku screams at him, and the building shakes before he runs. The cycle continues, Katsuki finding Izuku and attacking ruthlessly, only for Izuku to scream and run for it, buying Kaminari all the time he could need. He's glad he's not limited to sounds he doesn't make, and that his voice is his greatest weapon. It's an easy thing to take out a gun, but it's not as easy to take out something that's so close to vital parts of his body. Katsuki can't destroy that. Not without risking killing Izuku. He can't take every sound in the world and destroy it, just because he wants to leave Izuku powerless. He just can't. Kaminari calls him a few moments later, apologizing for something and saying that there had been complications, but he's getting close. Izuku only confirms that he heard, and keeps moving. Of course, he's expecting it by now. He's jumped again. He kept telling himself that Katsuki couldn't take his voice. He can't destroy that, but judging by the sudden hand around his throat, Katsuki will certainly try. He's held against the ground, pinned under Katsuki's weight. He had ripped his helmet off, and slammed his head into the tile until his vision spun and Izuku was clawing at his wrists. Kaminari is in his ear, begging him to respond because he needs help, and it might even be good if he leads Bakugo there. But he can't respond, because the hand around his throat is heating up, and he can't scream. All Might is speaking into Katsuki's ear, telling him to stop and that the exercise is over, that Kaminari had gotten to the bomb and the hero team won. Izuku can't breathe. The hand around his throat is hot, too hot it burns, it burns. He can hear the blood rushing in his ears, and despite the colors going dark, he's hit with a desperate idea. He takes the dark, color-eating sound, and he makes it louder. He makes the communicator in Katsuki's ear screech, and he makes sure Katsuki can hear the way the blood in his head is rushing about. Katsuki's heavy breathing is turned against him, and suddenly they're both hit with the rib-shaking sound of the blood in his head, the bone-rattling feel of Katsuki's ragged breaths, and the sharp, electric screech of the communication device in Katsuki's ear. He's let go, and tears prick in his eyes as he gasps for air. The sounds have yet to quiet, and he refuses to let go, making waves taller, longer, louder because Katsuki had choked him. He tried to kill him. Izuku could have died. His hands had heated up too much. Izuku brought a hand to his neck, and felt the bruises there. He winced when his fingers brushed over the ring of heat blisters, some of which had already formed and popped with Katsuki's grip on his neck. He has yet to let go, even when Kaminari rushes into the area, and tells him he has to stop because Katsuki's ears are bleeding and he's gone unconscious. He doesn't want to let go because yes, Katsuki had bullied him for years and he had tolerated it, for the sake of not worrying anyone else, but this was going too far. No one could really blame Izuku when he snapped, even if only for a few moments. Finally, long after he'd been asked to stop, he lets go, and Kaminari helps him sit up as they wait for All Might and Recovery Girl. His throat hurts. He tries to say something, anything, but it hurts too much when his voice croaks, broken before it even left his mouth. Recovery Girl appears, and her first priority is Katsuki, because Katsuki is bleeding and lying on the floor unconscious, and it's all Izuku's fault. He comes out of his anger as soon as he sees what he did, and he cries. Izuku cries hard and long, despite how much it hurt, despite how he knew some would say he was justified in his actions. Because he'd hurt him. He'd done exactly what Katsuki did to him. He retaliated and now Katsuki is hurt because he couldn't control his anger. He falls into Kaminari's arms when he offers, because Kaminari is nice, and he knows him a little, and he's the closest person right now. Because Izuku is horrified by what he's done, and he doesn't think he can ever be redeemed after that. When he wakes up, he's in the infirmary, lying on one of the beds with an itchy blanket draped over his body. He's been turned on his back, and he can feel the bandages around his throat. He finds that the curtains have been pulled around the bed, so that he can't see the rest of the room. 10 minutes after he's woken up, Recovery Girl appears, comments on how he's awake, and runs some tests before leaving again. He can only hope she doesn't hate him. It's an hour before he's released to go back to class, and Izuku can't help it when he rushes over to her to ask, "Will Katsuki be okay?" It's the first time he tries to speak after waking up. His voice is scratchy and it looks like static. It hurts to talk. "He'll be fine. You both went a bit far, but you'll both be okay. After lunch, come back here. I couldn't heal you before because your energy reserves were so low, so I want you back in here as soon as you have some food in your body, young man," she says, waving her cane at him. "Yes, ma'am," Izuku replies, speeding off to class as soon as he can. Present Mike is in the classroom when Izuku returns. He's too tired to grasp the bright yellow voice in his mind, but his head ache screams at him anyway. Quirk use will only make it worse, and judging by the looks he's getting from his teacher, he won't mind if he lays his head down on the desk for a minute. Sure enough, Izuku fell asleep 4 minutes into the PRD, trying not to stare at Katsuki's chair in front of him. He's woken up by a tap on his shoulder from Siro. The boy gives him a pitying look, and points out that he's been asleep for 2 class PRDs. "It's lunch right now. You want to sit with us?" he asks, pointing to Kaminari, Ashido, and Kirishima behind him. "I have a friend I'm sitting with," he says, voice still scratchy and hurting. "That purple-haired guy, right? Wasn't his name Shinso?" Kaminari asks. "He's kinda cute." Izuku knows Hitoshi's face would flare up at that, and a giggle is let loose from his mouth, which he tries to cover with his hand. "What?" he says incredulously. "I can't be the only one. In fact, I know I'm not the only one," he announces. "Oh no you don't." Ashido yelps as she tackles Kaminari to stop him from talking, though it utterly fails. "Ashido told me she thinks Shinsu's hot," he shouts, before Ashido takes the opportunity to kick him in the ribs. They both fall over laughing, while Kirishima could only look on with concern. "Anyway," Siro says, turning away from the chaos that is Ashido and Kaminari in the same room, "maybe we could eat with you and Shinso instead?" "That's fine with me, but you may have to ask Hitoshi before you just sit down," Midoriya answers. "Okay." Kaminari jumps up from his spot on the floor, yanking Ashido to her feet after him. They leave the class, with Izuku in tow, Siro and Kirishima following behind. "So," Kirishima starts, seemingly unsure of what he was going to say. It was strange for someone as confident as him to be nervous like this. "With Katsuki. Has he hurt you before?" Izuku doesn't answer, and Kirishima freaks out, assuring him that he doesn't have to say a thing if he doesn't want to. They all reach the table, the mood brought down a bit by Kirishima's unprompted question. Hitoshi is staring at his food in indecision again, almost always unsure of whether or not he should eat it. Yet again he greets Izuku, and only Izuku, before taking a tentative bite of his rice. He stares at the food with distrust written all over his face, but keeps eating anyway. "Hey, Hitoshi," Izuku says, "you've already met Ashido and Kaminari." He gestures to the two, who enthusiastically wave behind him, "and this is Siro and Kirishima." Kirishima offers a small wave, while Siro full-on leans over Izuku to shake Hitoshi's hand. "Hey there. 'Fraid I haven't heard anything about you from Izuku, but I don't know him all that well either. I was hoping we could eat with you guys today?" Siro asks. His introduction is so formal that Izuku almost suspects that he's a rich kid, but that may just be the way he is. Hitoshi stares at the hand before accepting it, and scoots over to let Izuku into the seat next to him. "Sure," is his only answer, before he's crowded into Izuku by Kaminari slipping in on the other side. "Great." Kaminari easily throws an arm around Hitoshi's shoulders, before he's shrugged off. He fakes a dejected look for a moment, before he moves on to eat his food. "So, Izuku, why are you sounding so rough?" Hitoshi asks. "Katsuki." His answer is one word, and he leaves it at that. Hitoshi doesn't push, because Izuku had already ranted to him over text about how the world must be testing him and Katsuki was in the same class as him. "I have to go to Recovery Girl once I finish eating, so I'll be leaving a bit early," he says. "Then eat up, fucker. We all know you'll end up hurting yourself worse if you don't get healed," Hitoshi jokes. He forces Izuku to eat his food, rather than get caught up in the conversation around him. Izuku almost feels like a child, but Hitoshi is really just watching out for him, and they both know that Izuku would do the same if their roles were swapped. As soon as Izuku is done, he stands up to throw away his trash, but not before leaning down to Hitoshi and whispering, "Two people at this table think you're hot, and you may never know who." Surely enough, Hitoshi's face turns bright red, while Kirishima and Ishido worry over him. Izuku laughs and walks down to the infirmary after he throws his trash away. Katsuki is still in the infirmary. He's still fast asleep, all healed up and healthy again, but still asleep. It hurts Izuku to look at him. His throat is healed, and it no longer hurts to speak. There are no blisters or burns left. It looks and feels like nothing was injured in the first place. Every few minutes, he can't help but reach up to feel the smooth skin where a ring of blisters and burns had once been. Katsuki does go home at the end of the day, fully healed, no scarring, nothing to suggest he'd been harmed in the first place. The worst thing, though, is how he acts towards Izuku. He used to trip him, to beat him up and spit seething words in his face. He hated him with a burning passion. Now he wouldn't even look at him. Hitoshi is handed a bottle of melatonin first thing in the morning. He's just gotten off the train, and Izuku shoved it into his hands. "I used to have problems sleeping and we never really knew why. It stopped a while ago, but we ended up keeping the melatonin around. It's not expired, so don't worry about that. It's still got a year left to go. At least try to see if it helps," he said. Hitoshi only stuffs it in his pocket, before he pulls Izuku close and hugs him as tight as he can. Of course, he's Izuku's confidant. He'd been told what happened, and while he wasn't around for his whole life, he did know how much of a bully Katsuki was, for seemingly no reason. The choking, the threat of death, the fear. So maybe he felt like Izuku was at least a little justified in what he did. But Izuku is Izuku. He feels horribly guilty and said as much. He knows that Izuku will suffer in silence and internalize everything. It's how he is, and it seems it will take a lot to fix it. He lets go before Kaminari and Ishido catch up to them, and lets Izuku wipe the sudden onslaught of tears off of his face, before he can be questioned. "Hey, Midoriya." "Shinso," Kaminari shouts, despite being right next to them. Hitoshi winces. "Hi Kaminari." "Hello Ishido," he says. "Hi Shinso." Ishido is quick to grab his hand and drag him along, in spite of how little he knew her. She simply had no boundaries. "If we don't hurry up, we're gonna be late, so we gotta go. I saw you two hugging in the middle of the station. You're slackers." She jokes. He hears Izuku's sharp laugh behind him. But of course, the press had to appear, didn't it? The press was no joke. They've surrounded the gates, and Midoriya is separated from Ishido, Kaminari, and Hitoshi. He's got a microphone in his face, and there's 30 questions he's being asked to answer at once. All the sounds are blending together in a dark muddy puddle that sloshes everywhere every time someone else starts to talk. He's stuttering and mumbling, trying in vain to give them the answers they want. Soon enough, there's a hand on his shoulder leading him through the crowd. He looks up to find Aizawa-sensei, ruthlessly shoving people aside and trying to get to the gate with Izuku in tow. Izuku finds that both Kaminari and Ishido had latched onto him along the way, and that they all make it to the gate in one piece. "If you don't mind," Aizawa calls out, "we'd like our students to get to class on time. Would you please get your news story elsewhere?" There are 40 mics shoved in Aizawa's face, and they take it as a cue to leave, flashing their student IDs at the censor. Hitoshi is already inside the gates, leaning against the wall, and waiting for them. "Took you long enough," he says. "Never thought I'd say it, but in this moment, I'm thankful I'm in 1C. They don't effing care about general students." Hitoshi laughs, sharp and annoyed. Izuku can tell that despite his joking, he's a bit angry. Izuku is soon dragged into class and nearly pushed into his seat by Kaminari, who promptly walks behind him and drapes his entire body over Izuku's. "Kaminari, what are you doing?" he asks, voice smothered by the hold Kaminari's arms have around his face. "I wanted to hug you, but I sat you down too fast, and it felt awkward to pull you back up for a hug, so this felt like the best solution," Kaminari explains. I don't think we've ever mentioned how bad a majority of Kaminari's ideas are, Ishido says, peeling Kaminari off of him, before giving him a hug of her own, without suffocating him. Anyway, she says, finally letting him go, what do you think we're gonna do today? It feels like something big is gonna happen. You act like Sensei tells us anything, Kaminari points out. I mean, first day the man threatened to expel us. Good point. So then what do you hope will happen? Something normal, Izuku says. God, wouldn't that be a blessing? Day 3 on UA campus and I already feel like dying. Kaminari dramatically drapes his body over Izuku's desk, until Ishido kicks him in the shin. I mean, it's still a school. They still have to teach us normal stuff. I wouldn't be all that surprised if we just did something normal instead of a training regimen of death, or something. Even so, I don't think there will be a day too soon where all we do is normal stuff, Izuku points out. Just then, Aizawa-sensei makes his way through the door, wrapped up in his sleeping bag once again. Quiet down, he says. He waits a few moments to speak again. 5 seconds. You're improving. You're choosing a class president and vice president today. The class erupts in noise, everyone quite excited that they'd be doing something normal. Sir, Ida shouts, should we hold a vote, or choose our president in another way? I don't care, as long as you're done before the class PRD is over. Yes, sir. Students, I believe we should organize a vote to choose our president. Whoever gets the most votes will be the president, and the second most will become vice president. We barely know each other though, says Azui, wouldn't everyone just vote for themselves? Which is exactly the reason that whoever gets the most votes would be worthy of the position. Ida organizes slips of paper and a box for the vote to be held anonymously. The votes are soon tallied up and Ida ended up with 2. Izuku ended up with 3. How? He shouts. Well, Kaminari and Ishido both have sheepish looks on their faces. But I didn't vote for myself. I voted for Ida. Who's the third vote? Ah, that was me, Ida calls out. Izuku groans and his head makes a thumping noise against the desk. Sensei, may I relinquish the position to someone else? No. You got the votes. Unless you can prove that someone else can do a better job than you, you're stuck. Yet again, Izuku's head hits the desk, and Kaminari finally looks like he regrets his decision. Sorry dude. You just seemed like the best choice for the job. He says. Yeah. You always have something going on in that head of yours. I think you'll be a great leader. Ishido says, trying to reassure him. Indeed. I only felt it right to choose you for your tact in battle, despite the opponent you had. Ida has a way with words, that much is for sure, but he's a bit blunt. Izuku is almost glad, just for a moment, that Katsuki had been suspended for how far he went in the battle trials, because if he hadn't he's sure Ida would have been beat up in seconds. He ignores his classmates' praises in favor of replaying the events in his head and thinking of every other possible way he could have gotten out without harming Katsuki so badly. Ida really shouldn't have picked him for his tact in battle if that were the case. Lunch finally rolls around after an annoyingly difficult math class. Izuku very much prefers science, especially when they get to wave studies. Call him biased, but he'll always be more excited to learn about his quirk than numbers that don't make sense. A teacher had once asked him if, theoretically, he could control waves other than sound or light, like gravity waves, or possibly even brain waves. Of course, Izuku had no idea. He'd never tried to experiment with that sort of thing. Sound was usually enough for him, and he's not sure what use gravity waves would be to him, even if he could control them. Maybe he could try to do something with Hitoshi on a weekend. The boy's voice had always held this strange property to it that Izuku couldn't quite place. It was enticing, and he wanted to take Hitoshi's voice to pick it apart and find this property, but that would be creepy. So he doesn't. Perhaps that strange property is the key to controlling brainwaves. In theory, all he has to do is somehow replicate this property in his own voice and gain control. Much easier said than done, seeing as he doesn't even know what the property is, nor its function. But he's thinking too deep. He just wants to go to lunch and eat. Hitoshi, Izuku mumbles, already tired. What's got you all down? Hitoshi asks. Kaminari answers his question before Izuku can even open his mouth. He's pouty, 'cause Kaminari points between himself and Ishido, voted him class president, and Aizawa won't let him pass the duties to someone else. Izuku groans and drops his head on the table as Kaminari recounts the tale. Don't remind me, he whines. Unless I find someone more capable, I can't pass it to someone else. Ida is obviously more capable though. I'm just not for it. We're sorry, Izuku. Maybe we should have actually checked if you wanted to be president first, Ishido says. It's alright. I'm sure I'll find someone. Ida is bound to end up doing something that deems him worthy, Izuku mumbles. Just as he finished speaking, the alarm rang, loud and clear. Izuku's first reaction is to grab the blaring red noise and try to force it down, but that would only cause more confusion. We're supposed to evacuate, right? Kaminari asks. Ishido is already grabbing his arm to yank him out of his seat, before doing the same to Hitoshi, and eventually Izuku. Yeah, she says, catching Izuku when he stumbles, but everyone's panicking so much I don't know if we could get to the exit. She points towards the nearest designated exit door, which is already crowded with people, pushing and shoving to get through. Then we wait for a minute. There's no immediate threat visible, and they should be leaving in a calm, orderly manner if they want to survive this sort of thing anyway, Hitoshi points out. The alarms keep blaring for a few minutes longer, before Izuku, Hitoshi, Ishido, and Kaminari throw themselves into the tail end of the fray. It's all for naught in the end. The moment they get into the hall, Hitoshi and Kaminari are shoved up against the glass. Of the windows, Ishido is quickly lost to the movement of the crowd, and Izuku is pressed against the wall across from Hitoshi and Kaminari. So maybe this was a bad idea, Kaminari calls out. Yeah, just a bit, says Hitoshi. The crowd quiets, and Izuku isn't sure how he missed the noise of Ida's engines, but it's impossible to miss his loud, blue voice. Everyone, please calm yourselves. There is no danger. The press simply got through the barrier. Ida points out the window, and sure enough, there's the media, held back by the teachers of UA. Now, if we could please file back into the lunchroom in an orderly manner. Ida shouts. Once they're no longer crushed between walls, windows, and sweaty bodies, they can breathe a bit. Does anyone at this school know how to use deodorant? Ishido whines, I'm pretty sure I can't smell anything anymore. God, you're telling me, Kaminari, being shorter than everyone save for Izuku, had gotten the brunt of the attack. Izuku sticks out his tongue in mock disgust, before they all burst into laughter. I never thought I'd be lucky to be so tall, Hitoshi jokes. Yeah, you absolute titan. How do you live with being able to reach the top shelf? Kaminari whines. I sacrifice the concept of a shower I can use, Hitoshi deadpants. Kaminari howls in laughter. Lunch is almost over, Ishido says, pointing at the watch on Hitoshi's wrist. Well, at least we got to eat before the stampede, Kaminari says, once he's done laughing. And we don't have hero studies today, Izuku points out. I still would have liked to finish my lunch, Ishido grumbles. The moment she's done, the bell rings, and they're all off to class again. Hey, Midoriya, didn't you say that Aizawa wouldn't let you give up your spot unless you found someone that could do a better job? Kaminari asks. Yes. Well, what about Ida? Good point. Ishido shouts. I mean, after what he pulled with the whole emergency exit thing, he'd be a great option. I never thought I'd say this, but Kaminari, you're a genius, Izuku says teasingly. Rude. Sensei. Izuku says, just before class starts. What? Considering that Ida did a much better job with crowd control today than I ever could have done, I'd like to resign from my place as class president and pass it on to him, Izuku announces. If it's all right with Ida, I don't care, Aizawa says, before he curls up behind his desk. Ida, of course, takes the role with gratitude. Too much in Izuku's opinion, but he can't stop him. Thank you, Midoriya-san. Ida shouts. Izuku can only nod and go back to his seat. There's no big battle trial today. No one gets hurt, unless you count the way Kaminari almost cries when they're assigned an essay on behavior with injured citizens. Well, Azui does hit Mineta, but he seems to be fine. Eventually, they're all sent home. Izuku can barely listen to anyone around him, too lost in his own thoughts. Hitoshi notices, but he doesn't say a thing. That's probably for the best though. Izuku hardly notices the morning. He knows he woke up, got ready, and ended up on the train, but past that he can't really remember much. He finally comes out of his stupor when Hitoshi taps him on the shoulder. Kaminari and Ishido don't walk with them today, though. Shiro seems to find them through the crowd, and joins them. He fills the air with meaningless chatter, despite getting no responses, and Izuku is all the more grateful for it. There's something about noises like this that make him feel safe. Not the terrifying sound of explosions, drenched in red and orange. Not the soul-crushing beat of blood rushing through his ears. Not the sickly yellow crackling of burned flesh. Izuku stops himself from thinking anymore. He's not there. Katsuki is still suspended for another day, safe and sound, suffering no ill effects from Izuku's attack. Izuku is here, walking next to Hitoshi and listening to Shiro's gray-blue chatter. He likes it, the way Shiro's voice dips and smooths out with every soft laugh and hitch in his breath that interrupted him. It's not the same hypnotizing waves of Hitoshi's dark navy voice, but it calms him all the same. They make it through the gates for another day, and Hitoshi bids Izuku a short goodbye and a promise that he'll be at their lunch table again. Shiro walks beside Izuku to class. He's still talking, but Izuku can see how observant Shiro is. He's no longer asking questions and waiting for an answer that won't come. Instead, he points out the obvious, for the sake of letting Izuku listen. He's quite glad he met Shiro. The boy is nice and very socially aware. He knows how to read people and just what they need to hear from him. Izuku wonders if it's something he learned or something he's gifted with. "We're here," Shiro announces. Izuku still doesn't say a word, but he knows Shiro doesn't miss the smile aimed at him. In the next few minutes, Izuku feels more awake. Kaminari has taken to sitting on Izuku's desk and running a hand through Izuku's hair from time to time, always commenting on how soft it is. Ishido joins him, and Izuku finds that he doesn't mind. "Hey, Izuku," Ishido starts, "since you're so good at predicting stuff, what do you think we'll do today?" "I dunno," Izuku mumbles. "I control sound and light waves, not the future." "Wouldn't that be a cool quirk though?" Kaminari asks. "Yeah." Shiro joins in on petting Izuku's head the moment Ishido's hand moves away. "Holy shit, it is soft," he mutters. "Anyway, I think that would be pretty cool. Imagine what you could do with that. You could solve world peace and shit," Ishido says. "That's what they said about All Might, but look where we are now," Izuku mutters. "Wow, did you pick up that pessimism from Shinso or something?" Kaminari pouts. "You do have to see the difference there, though," Shiro points out. "All Might doesn't have a future-altering quirk or anything. He's got what's assumed to be super strength. He is a symbol of peace, but that doesn't mean he could solve world peace on his own." "Yeah, so stop it with your pessimism, little man," Ishido teases, gently hitting Izuku in the arm. The bell rings, and the three return to their desks before Aizawa can get on to them. "Get your hero costumes. You're going on a field trip, there's no greeting. No good morning message." Izuku doesn't think he hates Aizawa for it. He's a simple, straight-to-the-point kind of person. That's not so terrible. Izuku's speakers are still being repaired, but the rest of his costume was fine. It had to be washed very carefully, considering the residual nitroglycerin on it, but he was free to wear it now. He dresses as quickly as possible and mentally notes that the next design will have a longer neck and better armor. The class files on to the bus, Ida kicking up a fuss about single file lines all the while, only to find out that it went unneeded. Kaminari plops down next to Izuku and across from Kirishima and Shiro. Ishido steals the spot on his other side instead. "Gosh darn it, Izuku." Ishido pouts. "Use your psychic powers. Save us from whatever terrible fate Aizawa-sensei has assigned to us." "I'm not psychic though. If anything, Hitoshi would be the one with psychic powers." "He's got a point," Kaminari says. "Izuku, I want to know something." Ishido ignores Kaminari entirely. Has Shinso ever tried to brainwash himself? Is that a thing he can do?" Kaminari gives her an incredulous look, and fires off his own response before Izuku can form words. "What kind of question is that, Mina?" he asks. "Quirks don't workly dash." "Well, she makes a good point," Izuku interrupts. "I don't know if he has. We can ask him when we get back." Kaminari pouts, before he leaps across the aisle to fling himself into Siro's lap. "Siro, Mina is being mean and Izuku being too cute for me to be mad. Love me." Siro has a hand at his mouth, trying and failing to conceal his laughter. Kirishima is in the same state right next to him. Almost too fast, Ida had picked Kaminari up, set him back in his seat, lectured him about the importance and safety of staying in his own seat, before returning to wherever he had chosen to sit. "What just happened?" Kaminari mumbles. Siro had ultimately failed from restraining himself, and bursts into laughter. "Did you call me cute just a second ago?" Izuku asks. Denki gives him a look that Izuku can't quite place his finger on, but he never gets an answer. The bus stops and they're told to step off. Izuku can't help the look of awe on his face at the sheer size of the building. He wants to say the inside is even bigger, but that would make no sense. "Wow," he hears Ashido gasp beside him. "Alright class. Today we're working on rescue drills. Space Hero 13 is here to assist," Aizawa drones. "I'll let them take over." He steps aside to let a person in a bulky white suit step forwards. "Hello students," they say. "I'm sure that many of you know me as a rescue hero, but do any of you here know what my quirk is?" He hears Uraraka's bubbly voice in the back say something about a black hole, but Izuku finds that he can't quite focus on it. There's something in the air, quiet, nearly unnoticeable little waves, that he likely wouldn't have noticed if it weren't for wispy dark movement in the corner of his eye. And yet, there's nothing there. Just an eerie sound that makes shivers crawl up his spine, that no one else can hear. 13's little speech is coming to an end, but the sound only gets louder. "Sensei," he says, his voice just above a whisper, "I think there's something here with us." "What do you mean, Midoriya?" It's all deadly quiet for a moment. No movement is made, and Izuku knows he's the only one that can hear it, because his classmates don't react to the swell of the dark sound. And soon, it all explodes. The wispy shapes in the corner of his eye expand to block his vision for a moment, before they shrink down again to reveal where the sound had come from. A dark figure, composed of the same shapes Izuku saw, stood in the middle of the plaza, a multitude of villains spilling out of the portal it created. "Stay back!" Aizawa shouts. "These are villains." 13, take the students and get out, he says. With dark look in his eyes, Aizawa leaps into the fray. "Quickly! Get out!" 13 says, urgency prevalent in their voice. They're too late though. The being appears again, dark waves coming off of it. Izuku's head hurts, trying to comprehend the way that matter moves within the being. It looks wrong. It's not just a warp gate, Izuku knows that much. "I'm afraid I can't let that happen," the being says. "You see, I've been sent to scatter you little heroes. It's not a warp gate. It's not a portal. As much as I'd love to kill you here and now, I can't do so just yet," he mutters. He's made of shadow. The thought comes much too late, because Izuku has already been SC'd into a shadow realm. He sticks his hands out around him, trying desperately to control the shadows. This is his power. He controls where the light goes, and the darkness in its absence. Midoriya manages to find another one of his classmates in the dark, and he grips their hand, in hopes that they won't be separated. It all happens in the span of a few seconds. They're set down on the ground, and immediately soaked in water. Izuku looks down, and finds his hand attached to Tokoyami's. Izuku lets go, but Tokoyami looks like he's struggling to keep it together. He has a hand to his head, gripping the dark feathers and gritting his teeth. "Tokoyami," Izuku says, "are you all right? I need light. Dark shadow will take over in this mess. You'll be endangered," he hisses. "Okay, I can do that," Izuku says, voice panicky. Carefully, Izuku finds what light he can through the squall. It's white, artificial light, and Izuku can't help but think that sunlight would do better, but this would work for now. Izuku pulls down the lights from the ceiling, pouring it into the shadows surrounding Tokoyami. The boy visibly relaxed, with a soft sigh escaping his beak. "Thank you," he mutters. "I should be fine now. You can release the light." "You're sure?" "Yes." Izuku lets go of his grip on the lights, and allows it to escape back to the fluorescent bulbs above. "Why are we here?" Tokoyami asks. "The villains wanted to separate us, I believe," Izuku says, "but they aren't doing a very good job. They put us in a dark place with lots of noise. If anything, we're more powerful here than they are." "Then they must not know what our quirks are," Tokoyami speculates. "I don't currently see any villains about, but we'd ought to be careful. They could be hiding." "Right?" Izuku mumbles. "Should I create a sound barrier, so that we can hear and they can't?" "Only if it doesn't affect your stamina. We need all the strength we have," Tokoyami says. Izuku only nods his head, and creates a barrier around the two of them, so that there's no sound, despite the rain that still pours down on top of them. Tokoyami looks surprised at the loss of sound, but calms after a moment. "I hope there aren't any other students here," he mutters. They walk about with no incident. Not one villain jumps out. They soon see why. There's a group of villains surrounding someone else, lying on the ground. They throw jeers at them, along with kicking and hitting them relentlessly. They have yet to hear Izuku and Tokoyami, and Izuku uses this to his advantage. The sound is deafening for anyone it was directed at. Each and every villain fell to the gray pounding of the rain, as the sound became thunderous, beating in their chests and shaking their lungs. One screamed, as fragile bones shattered, succumbing to the dark thundering of the rain. Izuku didn't have to lift a finger. Kuda lies in the middle of the chaos, shaking and bruised, but otherwise unharmed. His wrist is sprained, but he can walk. "We have to get out of here," Tokoyami says to Kuda. He helps him up off of the concrete, and Kuda begins to frantically sign something. Tokoyami asks him to slow down as he deciphers his signs, and his eyes widen in fear as he finally translates it. "What did he say?" Izuku asks. He says they want to kill All Might," Tokoyami whispers. Izuku is silent for a moment, before the gravity of the situation crashes down on him. "We've got to get out of here." Izuku lets go of the bone-rattling sound of the rain, and finds Kuda's and Tokoyami's hands in his own. Silently, they make their way through the rain. They've finally made their way out of the rain, with only a few more encounters with villains. Each time, the dark, thunderous sound of rain will bring them to their knees, or the horrifying might of dark shadow may simply toss them to the side, as if they were nothing more than a rag doll. Kuda is thoroughly terrified of his classmates, and he can't help but be thankful that they're on the same side as him. Izuku shoves open the door that contained the monsoon, and they're met with open water and a soaking wet Azui. "Azui," Tokoyami says, "are you all right?" "Yeah, we just got out of the shipwreck zone," she croaks, gesturing to Uraraka and Mineta next to her. "We ended up here on our way to the plaza, when the ground started rumbling, and we hear this huge noise. We thought it might have been Midoriya, and we were going to go in to look for you but voted not to." Uraraka cuts Azui off, pointing at Mineta, who at least had the decency to look ashamed. "Well, the noise was Midoriya," Tokoyami says. "He used the rain against the villains." "Where's Aizawa-sensei?" Izuku asks. "He's fighting the villains, but he's outnumbered." Azui points to the plaza, where Izuku can see the defeated villains on the sidelines. Despite this, Azui is right. More villains are rushing in, and Izuku can see the way Aizawa is slowing down. "Then we help him," Izuku says. "Are you crazy?" Mineta shouts. "Those are villains. They'd kill us." "And?" Uraraka asks. "Sensei is in trouble. He needs our help. We could die in the hero field anyway, so there's no use in being afraid of it now." Uraraka is right, Azui says. "We need to help him, regardless of the risk." "Then let's go." Izuku is already making his way towards the plaza, hunched over and hiding behind whatever debris he can find. Tokoyami and Kuda soon follow as well, before Uraraka and Azui are after them. Mineta stays where he is for a moment, and promptly runs in the other direction, shouting something about finding their other classmates. The five of them all hide behind a particularly large rock, next to the plaza, and begin to plan. We need to get Sensei out without them realizing, Uraraka says. That requires a distraction. I'll do that, Izuku says. I'm most capable to handle myself against multiple people, so it should be me. Are you sure about this? Tokoyami asks. I've never been so sure of anything. Alright, then as soon as they're distracted, we get Sensei dash. Izuku ignores Uraraka's voice in favor of the new one that appeared. Izuku pokes his head over the side of their hiding place, and he can vaguely hear Tokoyami ask what he's doing. The voice is gravelly and dark. It grates against Izuku's ears, and the image of gray-blue rocks grinding against each other obstructs his peripheral vision. There, just ahead of them, stands a thin man with hair the same color of his voice, and hands gripping his body wherever they can hold on. One of them obstructs his face, but Izuku can imagine very well the crazed look in his eyes and the twisted joy he feels. Eraserhead, he starts, it's good to see you here. You really are just so cool, but I was hoping for All Might. The schedule said he'd be here today. Aizawa doesn't answer. Instead, he glares at the man, hatred burning in his gaze. Well, it's a shame. Izuku can feel the meaning behind those words. He can feel the emotions inside the man, ever-changing, planning something. I wonder if he'll show up once I kill one of his students. His gaze, hidden by the horrifyingly real hand on his face, turns to their hiding place. He should have known. The man made of shadow would have told him they were there. Izuku should have been more careful. "Nu," he says, "restrain Eraserhead." Another being, hulking and almost as large as All Might, approaches. Its very existence makes Izuku's head hurt. It's silent, but Izuku knows that there are sounds there, dancing in his vision, that the others can't quite hear. Aizawa attempts to stop the being, eyes flaring red, and hair rising into the air like a dark fire. Yet it doesn't stop. Nothing changes. The being remains its size, the noises don't stop, and soon, Aizawa is restrained on the ground, face pressed into the concrete. Each time he struggles, the creature, brings his head down into the stone, until he lies there, hair matted with blood. The man stalks forwards, and Izuku stands straight, staring him dead on. He refuses to back down, grasping at the sounds around him in a viper-like grip. His mind pulls and stretches the noises, ready to use them at a moment's notice, because Izuku will not die without a fight. He reaches a hand towards him, rough, cracked skin evident in his palms. Aizawa struggles again, only for his skull to meet stone in a sickening crack. Izuku lets go of the sounds around him, allowing them to grow around the man in a deafening roar. He falls to the ground, and his fingers claw at his ears and throat. He looks like Katsuki. It makes Izuku stumble, letting the sound slip away. He's not Katsuki, but the way he screamed made Izuku afraid. What is he doing? He was going to kill someone. It was ready to shatter his bones and burst his blood vessels until all that was left was a shapeless mound, writhing in pain. Izuku screams. He's a monster. A horrible monster. He nearly killed him. He can see the blood dripping out of his ears as he towers over Izuku. Where are they? Where are his classmates? Where did they go? With his head between his knees, he barely sees Tokoyami rise, as dark shadow erupts from his chest. He hardly spots the way Uraraka and Azui stand to defend him. He can't feel Kuta's hands under his arms, lifting him up and away from their hiding place. He can't go. He can't. They'll get hurt. Izuku struggles against Kuta's grip, shouting at him to let go, before he's finally dropped from his hold. Izuku rights himself as soon as his feet touch the ground. Kuta holds his hands over his ears, and Izuku knows he accidentally used his quirk. There's no time to be afraid now. They could be dead. Numu! Izuku hears the gravelly voice again, slightly off, now that he can't hear correctly. Grab the brat. Bring him here. There's only a second between the time he says it, and the moment the creature slams Izuku into the ground. Izuku's head goes fuzzy, and it takes a moment to clear up again. He's held in the creature's grip, as it carried him towards his master. He called it a Numa. He wonders if this is what they would have used to kill All Might. "You little sheet," he mutters. "You have no idea what I can do," he hisses. He snatches up a rock, and holds it in front of Izuku's face. He allows all 5 fingers to touch the object, and Izuku watches as it crumbles to dust before him. Izuku is horribly afraid of the man. The man will succumb to sound and flashing light. Izuku could deafen him at any moment, could blind him with darkness gathered around his eyes, but the Numu will not surrender to such things. The Numu, full of pounding noises that no one else can hear. The Numu, a hulking beast that could crush Izuku in its hands, but doesn't, because it answers only to the words of its master. Izuku can feel the tears streaming down his face, and in a last, desperate attempt to live, shouts what he believes would be his final words. "Please, I don't want to die." "Not yet," he cries out. Izuku doesn't pay much attention to the way his own voice looks. It's like being able to see your nose. You know you can, but your brain ignores it. Now though? Now, Izuku can see the way that bright yellow energy crackles through the air. He sees the way the energy dances and jumps with his every word. Izuku sees the energy enter the man's head, dancing through his hair, into his skull, and dispersing before it can hit the ground. He stops, eyes blank, unseeing, hand frozen in the air just inches from Izuku's throat. He doesn't see it. He begs the man not to kill him, unaware of his frozen state, inches from him. "Put him down," the man whispers. The Numu's hands disappear, and Izuku is dropped to the ground. He keeps his eyes down, breathing heavily, tears streaming down his face. "Tamura Shigaraki, what are you doing?" the shadow asks. The man, Tamura, doesn't answer. He only stares ahead. "Tamura Shigaraki," the shadow shouts. Again, Tamura doesn't answer. Izuku only notices how still he is when he looks up, finding the man silent, frozen like a statue. Instinct orders him to tell the man something. Anything. "You need to leave," he says. His voice is quiet, barely anything more than a whisper, but it crackles and jumps like electricity all the same. Again his voice weasels its way into Tamura's head, and the man turns on his heel, towards the shadow. "Kurogiri, we're leaving," he mutters. "Tamura Shigaraki, All Might has yet to arrive, we can wait for dash." "I said we're leaving," he shouts. There's anger in his voice, but it's no longer directed at Izuku. He doesn't even acknowledge that Izuku is still there. Izuku uses this to his advantage, and scrambles to his feet. He runs away the moment he can, finding Kuda and Tokoyami lifting Aizawa's broken body from the ground. Kurogiri keeps arguing with Tamura, telling him that Midoriya had gotten in his head, that his thoughts were not his own. Tamura yells at him, telling him to shut his mouth, that he didn't know what he was doing. He keeps saying they have to leave. Izuku can hardly pay attention to it. Aizawa is dying. Izuku can see it in the way his chest rattles with wheezing breaths, in the way his eyes lose focus, as he mutters something his students can hardly hear. Izuku rushes after, picking up the trailing ends of his scarf, stopping Tokoyami and Kuda from tripping over it. "What did you do?" Tokoyami asks, voice low. "I don't know," Izuku mutters. Tokoyami doesn't say a word. He doesn't say a word when they reach the stairs, Azui and Uraraka waiting for them at the top. He doesn't say a word when they're told of Ida's escape and that help would come soon. Izuku will always be ever grateful for that. He's not sure he can stand speaking anymore. He can feel blood drip from his nose, down his chin, and he tastes copper in the back of his throat. Uraraka grabs Aizawa's arm, lifting him into the air, so as to let Kuda and Tokoyami take a break. It's then, the moment that the scarf is piled atop their teacher's body so that none of them trip, that Izuku collapses on the ground. All hell breaks loose. Shigaraki ceases in his fight with Kurogiri, and he turns his eye to the children above. He finds only one that suits his interest, crumpled to the ground, classmates fretting over him. He cries out in rage, and Kurogiri recognizes that the spell was broken, but it's all too late. The doors burst open and there, in all his prowess, stood All Might. "Don't worry," he shouts, a smile as bright as the sun adorning his face. "I am here." Despite the hope upon their faces, despite the fear that struck all villains in the building at the sound of those words, their teacher still lies still, broken, barely holding on by a thread. Despite all this, Izuku is unconscious, their strongest classmate, knocked to the ground. Despite it all, their children, and they're still horribly afraid. Tamura Shigaraki is enraged. He had been controlled, taken advantage of. The brat had nearly forced them to leave. Had it not been for Kurojire's disobedience, they likely would have. The door slams open, All Might appearing on the scene with a sickening smile on his face. He mutters. Do what you were made for. Kill All Might. The Numa dashes forwards. Its great, hulking body hardly limiting its movement. All Might is quick to meet in the middle, preventing it from getting to his students. Though, it wouldn't harm them now. Not with its goal in mind, the exact thing it was built for. No, it only did what its master said, and its master had instructed it to kill. The two trade blows, each blocking the others, a perfect match in power. But the Numu doesn't tire out. The Numu doesn't stay injured. The Numu only surpasses All Might in terms of stamina, and considering that All Might is human, this is enough. All Might grasps the creature around the torso, and desperately hopes that its exposed brain is a weakness as he slams it into the ground. Or so he thought. A portal opens up beneath the creature, until it comes full loop, gripping All Might's sides until blood wells up under his shirt. He hears a loud yell, and something collides with the Numu. Its hands are coated in ice, along with All Might's torso. The voice that had first yelled screams, sharp and loud, and All Might sees the way young Kirishima's arm splinters like a branch in the grip of the Numu. He hadn't even noticed the hand missing from his side, grasping Kirishima's forearm in its vice grip. No! And suddenly, it's all gone. The Numu releases both himself and Kirishima. He falls to the ground, clutching his side. He can't help but stare at the way sparks fly across Kirishima's skin. The Numa hadn't broken his arm on its own. No, it had only helped. Izuku awakes to the sharp, painfully bright sound of a scream. No, he's not quite awake. He doesn't feel right, like he's not in his own body. He's hardly awake, but it's enough. He finds the source of the scream only seconds later, watching Kirishima with his newly broken arm, skin broken apart as though someone had taken to it with a pickaxe. It's held in the Numu's grip, along with a profusely bleeding All Might. Izuku knows he screamed something, he just can't remember what. The Numu lets go of them, and despite Tokoyami holding him down, Izuku pushes him away and manages to stand up. Shigaraki is saying something. He can't hear. It's all too horribly muffled. He ignores the way the Shigaraki screams at the Numu, then at him. He hardly moves when Shigaraki leaps forwards, falling into a portal, and appearing on the steps before Izuku. He's quiet now, but that just might be Izuku. He's much too close. There's a hand on his arm, and yet, Izuku doesn't cry out when his skin falls apart like paper, when his arm begins to burn because sinew snaps out of place and muscles shatter as it all falls apart. Izuku looks Shigaraki in the eye, and he orders the Numu to hit Shigaraki. It's a fast thing. Shigaraki goes flying, one leg broken. Kurojire is quick to catch him, and just as fast, they're gone, leaving behind each and every one of their allies, and their greatest weapon. Faster still, blood drips down Izuku's arm. Muscles hang out of place, ripped apart where Shigaraki had touched them. His skin had turned dry, becoming dust under his hand. Grayish flecks mixed in with his crimson blood, and yet, all Izuku can do is look at it blankly. His eyes don't quite look like they're seeing. The other heroes arrive too late, really only there to pick off the villains left behind. They can't convince Izuku to move so that he can be healed. He's too out of it. Midnight comes close, and the Numu snarls like a rabid dog. They have to wait for the police to arrive. Izuku's hold over the Numu is fragile at best. The teachers don't even risk touching Izuku, should his hold over the feral creature fall apart. He's told later that they think only the dissociative state he was in allowed him to hold the Numu for so long. The Numu is quickly restrained, and Midnight finally knocks Izuku out before he can put up too much of a fight. He's a student, yes. He's a child, an injured child at that, but these people were no idiots. After all, there were currently 3 villains stuffed into an ambulance, muttering about sounds so loud that they shattered bone. One was left with a severe concussion and a collapsed lung. He's a student, but he's a dangerous one. Izuku is loaded into an ambulance, and Recovery Girl is quick to heal what she can with his limited energy, before they speed away to the hospital. When Izuku finally wakes, he's alone in the room. He's been dressed in the standard hospital gown, tucked under scratchy sheets. He can only wait for someone to come into the room, because he knows one of those little buttons calls the nurse, but he's not sure which, and would rather not risk pressing the wrong thing. A few minutes later, the door slides open, and the silence is broken by the nurse bustling about, adjusting equipment, and asking him how he felt. "Do you feel any pain, exhaustion?" "Yes. I'm still tired and I'm aching quite a lot. Otherwise, I'm fine," Izuku says. His voice croaks, throat dry, and tongue heavy in his mouth. He's surprised that he's able to get words out at all. "Could I get some water?" he whispers. The nurse smiles and nods, leaving the room as soon as he's done with his adjustments, before coming back with a plastic cup of water in hand. "Do you need any help?" "Yes." Izuku looks at his shaky hands and decides that they're much too shaky to help him. He nods his head, holding up his shaking hands for the nurse to see. He holds the mouth of the cup up to Izuku's lips, and tilts it back, careful not to spill it. As soon as he's downed all the water, the nurse takes the cup back and tells him to try to get some more rest. Izuku barely remembers the interaction by the time he wakes up again. When he wakes again, his mother is sitting at his bedside, tear tracks marking her face. Her hands grip her purse in a vice grip as fresh tears stream down her face. The worst thing is the way her voice shakes and jumps, darker and more unstable. With each shuddering breath, Izuku feels weak. He can barely sit up. It's all he can do to grasp her tight hands in his own. Hitoshi comes into the room a while later. His face was streaked with tears as well, and he visibly restrains himself from leaping at Izuku. Still, he wraps his arms around Izuku's neck in an awkward hug. Izuku buries his face in Hitoshi's shoulder, which is the closest he can get to hugging him back. Only then does Izuku begin to cry. He can't remember what happened past controlling Tamura. He can't remember a single thing. His memories are missing between then and now. All he knows is that he could have died. He only has the vague impression of being in danger, of blood pouring from wounds, and control of minds that simply weren't his own. He sees now why Hitoshi had always hated his quirk. Izuku felt sick at the thought. He'd taken away someone's free will. No matter how bad they were, he doesn't think anyone deserved that. Hitoshi whispers something in his ear, but Izuku can't quite hear it. "Izuku," he mutters, "are you okay?" Izuku only shakes his head against Hitoshi's shoulder, and cries just a bit harder. Hitoshi moves a hand along his back, and simply lets Izuku cry. Izuku stays in the hospital for a full week, doctors and nurses alike, all with healing quirks, slowly healing him up. They couldn't heal him all at once, due to the limitations of many of their quirks, but eventually, he was out of the hospital. The school had given them an impromptu 2-week break to sort everything out, as well as to let students process what had happened. Hitoshi spent the entire week in the Midoriya's apartment. When Inko had asked why, he mumbled something about wanting to give his parents some time to themselves, and making sure Izuku was okay. Inko lets him stay until school starts again. Some would say she worried for the boy's well-being, some might tell you Hitoshi made her do it. Of course, the only answer is that Inko cares too much, rivaled only by her self-sacrificial son. Soon enough, the week is over. A majority of it was spent eating, sleeping, and lamenting about what could have happened. Hitoshi always made him stop. The two of them just barely woke up on time, rushing to get ready for school. Inko shoves 2 boxes of food in their hands to eat on the train as they rush off. Hitoshi falls asleep on Izuku's shoulder during the ride, after he had eaten his breakfast. He made Izuku promise to wake him up before he drifted off. They arrive at the station, and Izuku shakes Hitoshi awake. Hitoshi groans and swats at Izuku's hand, but reluctantly wakes up anyway. The two of them find their way off of the train, only to be promptly tackled by Kaminari. "I'm sorry I couldn't visit you in the hospital," he cries. "My parents wouldn't let me, but I'm so glad you're okay." He pulls away and holds Izuku by the shoulders. "You are okay, right?" "I think so," Izuku mumbles. "Good enough." Midoriya. Ashido finds her way through the crowd, and wraps her arms around the three. "Thank God you're alive," she shouts, despite being next to Izuku's ear. Hi Ishido, he mutters. Hi. Just hi. Geez, Izuku, I thought I'd get more of a greeting than that. She jokes. She finally lets go of them, before Kaminari reminds her that they're going to be late if they don't leave now. Ishido grasps Izuku's hand in her own, and is quick to drag him through the crowd, along with Kaminari and Hitoshi in tow. They finally rush into class seconds before the bell rings. It's still another 2 minutes before Aizawa-sensei shows up. The class quiets instantly, and the man slips out of his sleeping bag to give them their announcements. You've all heard of the UA Sports Festival, yes? He's met with a chorus of agreement from the class. Good. Now, despite what happened at the USJ, you will still be participating in the event. The principal wanted to show that we were unaffected by the attack, even though we quite obviously were. He looks at Izuku pointedly as he says this. So, for the next few weeks, you'll all be training for the festival. The class groaned in despair, and Izuku couldn't help but feel the same. For a full week, they train just for the sports festival. Izuku is glad that it's going to be over soon. They participate in the festival tomorrow, and then they won't have to worry about it for another year. Izuku is ready to leave class as soon as possible. He eyes Bakugo wearily. The boy had come back the day after the USJ attack, but did nothing out of the ordinary, save for refusing to look Izuku in the eye. Regardless, the feeling of superheated hands around his throat won't go away. Izuku's hand is taken up by Kaminari, who quickly drags him towards the door. Don't worry about that a-hole, he whispers. You didn't do anything wrong, so it's okay. He could have gone deaf, Izuku mutters, just loud enough for Kaminari to hear. He could have died. He almost killed you, Midoriya, Kaminari says. Izuku doesn't respond, and only moves to hold Kaminari's hand a bit tighter when the boy squeezes it to reassure him. Kaminari slides the door open, and they're greeted with a growing crowd. Nearly all of them are saying something to the effect of, "We're going to beat you," and "You can't possibly be the best." It takes all Izuku has to not grasp the growing reds and oranges of the crowd and force them to be a bit smaller. Hey, a voice near the back says. Izuku knows that voice, with its navy ribbons and smooth timbre. Hitoshi makes his way through the crowd, until he stands just outside of Class 1A's door. Hi, Shinso, Kaminari says. Hello, Kaminari, he mumbles. Why are you all blocking our way? Ida asks. They're scoping out the competition, Hitoshi says. You're Class 1A. One of you is expected to win the sports festival, but we want to win too. We gotta see what we're going up against. Izuku, he starts, I'm not going to go easy on you just because you're my friend. You better not, Izuku says. Hitoshi smiles, a wry smirk that makes its way to his face far too often for Izuku's tastes. I'd consider it a declaration of war, he says. Soon enough, Hitoshi is walking back to the train station with Izuku, Ishido, and Kaminari, acting like he'd never stood just outside their classroom door and declared war. Kaminari hadn't reacted at all, but Ishido still seemed angry, as she refused to speak to Hitoshi. Hitoshi didn't speak to her either though, so perhaps she'd just given up. Hitoshi's train arrives first again, and soon, Izuku is left waiting at the station on his own, as Kaminari and Ishido had left on their train too. It's surprisingly easy for Izuku to collapse in bed that night. Izuku wakes up the next morning an hour early. He gets up anyway, rather than vying for extra sleep. He felt rested enough anyway. Something feels wrong. Nothing is blatantly out of place, but something seems off. Izuku ignores the feeling and gathers his clothing in his arms. He'll be changing into his gym uniform for the sports festival anyway. He steps into the bathroom and hopes that a quick shower will shake off the feeling of wrongness. It doesn't, but he feels cleaner all the same. Izuku steps into the kitchen, and the only thing he can do is scream, because there, lying on the ground, lays Hitoshi in a pool of his own blood. Inko doesn't come rushing into the room, but someone else, all too familiar to him, does. Mrs. Tsubasa enters the room in a panic, before she collapses into tears at the sight of Hitoshi. But it's not Hitoshi anymore. Tsubasa's lifeless body is left in his place, looking just the same as he did all those years ago. Izuku's eyes fly open, and he can hear his alarm clock on the other side of the room, waking him just when it was supposed to. He doesn't dream often, but he can usually tell when he is. Dreams don't technically have sound, so Mrs. Tsubasa's cries didn't evoke the same sharp colors that they would have. He couldn't tell this time, though. The nightmare scared him, seeing first Hitoshi, then Tsubasa, lifeless on the ground. He tries to shake the thought out of his head, though he's still a bit weary to step into the kitchen after he's gotten dressed. He stands in front of the bathroom mirror, hand held over the rough skin on his arm. His hand covers it perfectly, as though someone had grabbed him there before damaging the skin. He was still too scared to ask what happened. The stadium is huge, towering above Izuku. Just the entrance was at least 5 times taller than he was. He has a bit of time to walk around before the festival officially starts, but there isn't anything all that interesting. He's quite glad when Kaminari finds him and begins to talk his ear off. Izuku had missed meeting any of his friends at the train station, so it was a welcome sight. Eventually, they're called in for the festival to start. Midnight explains how the festival will work, playing up her flirtatious persona as much as she can without getting parents too angry. Now, the first-place student in the entrance exams will come up and present a speech. Midoriya Izuku, she says, pointing at him, come on up. He had not been informed of this. Was Aizawa supposed to tell him? Did he forget? Did he do that on purpose? This seemed like something Aizawa would do on purpose. Izuku's nerves skyrocketed, and he nearly tripped on his way up to the stand. Izuku stands in front of the microphone, desperately grasping for words. He knows his face is bright red, and there's no way he can hide the way his hands shake. He says, nearly shouting, I don't really have much that I feel like I can say. His voice is a bit quieter now, the microphone being his only saving grace. But I do want to tell all the students here, he's not quite sure what he's saying, just that he feels more confident and he's going somewhere with it. I want you all to try your best. No matter how good or bad you think you are, I think you can do even better. Izuku hardly needs the microphone now, his quirk latching onto his voice and boosting it for every person in and outside the stadium to hear. You're doing this for a reason. I want you to see that reason in front of you and work as hard as you can to reach it. Izuku is reminded of his dream of Tsubasa, dead and gone. He's reminded of why he chose this profession, to help people, to stop what happened to Tsubasa from ever happening again. So let's do this. Work your hardest. Plus ultra. Izuku can only smile when everyone echoes him, shouting their school's motto from behind him. Izuku is sent down from the stand when he's done, allowing Midnight to explain the rules for the first challenge. Kaminari hits him on the back, congratulating his speech. Many of the people around him do as well. Now, for your first challenge you'll be doing an obstacle race. She says, there will be 3 obstacles, of which I will reveal none. You are to run the race until you're back here. First back will get first place. It's all quite simple. You are not permitted to attack other students, seeing as this is a race, not a battle. The race begins. She makes a swinging motions with her whip in hand, pointing at the opposite wall, now. The wall opens to reveal a tunnel that, while incredibly tall, also remained quite thin. Students surged forwards to get through the tunnel first, until a multitude of them were trapped in the tunnel, pushing and shoving against each other. Izuku watched his classmates go over the crowd, as the rest simply fought their way through. Izuku lets out a short scream, and watches the students next to him rear back. It wasn't technically a direct attack. He shoves his way to the front of the crowd, letting out the occasional scream for anyone that was too stubborn to move. Finally, in only a few seconds, Izuku has made his way out of the tunnel, just behind Yaoyorozu. Todoroki had iced the ground, and Izuku was lucky he hadn't slipped when he burst out of the crowd. He can feel vibrations in the ground from something else, something larger. He has to get past the ice to worry about that. Izuku jumps at every patch of dirt he can see. There's just enough left on the sides for him to run without slipping. He doesn't quite catch up to Yaoyorozu, but that would be fine in a minute. The ice stops, and Todoroki is found at the end of the trail, staring up at something. The 0 pointers from the exam. He's waiting for something. Izuku can see the way he's thinking. The zero-pointer steps forwards. A wave of ice the size of a glacier stops it in its path. He was waiting for it to be off balance. Izuku jumps out of the way when, seconds later, the zero-pointer comes crashing down, ice shattering and wires snapping. Well, they're fairly slow anyway. Izuku rushes forwards, a scream ready in his throat should any of the robots notice him. It's just his luck that one does. It's a quick thing. The metal vibrates when Izuku screams at it, moving out of place until it falls apart, bit by bit. It's enough. Izuku runs as soon as he can, leaving a half-functioning robot behind. The next obstacle would be easy if it weren't for a certain someone. Izuku feels a tap on his shoulder and turns around to find Hitoshi next to him, standing at the edge of the man-made canyon. "Hey," he says. "Hi." Izuku answers. A mistake on his part. It's horribly easy to forget about Hitoshi's quirk. "You're going to carry me and use whatever tricks you have up your sleeve to get me into first place," he says. And of course, Izuku obeys. He turns around and allows Hitoshi to climb on his back, holding on to him none too gently. The next few minutes are a blur, and Izuku isn't terribly sure how he got across the gaps, just that he did, and Hitoshi constantly whispering commands in his ear didn't help his focus, as it only reaffirmed Hitoshi's control. Not one student bumped into Izuku. He was already ahead, and the only other people crossing the minefield at the moment were Todoroki and Bakugo. Well, Hitoshi did say any little trick in his arsenal. Can't detonate the mines if they're already detonated. Izuku lets loose a scream that shakes the ground. The mines explode, catching both Bakugo and Todoroki in the crossfire. Izuku only runs where the ground has ripped itself open, past Bakugo and Todoroki, still recovering on the ground. Izuku rushes forwards, through the tunnel at the end of the path. He can hear Bakugo screaming at him and the needle-thin sound of Todoroki's ice. "Get me in first place, Izuku," Hitoshi says. Izuku complies, waiting until they're only 2 feet from the finish line. He grabs Hitoshi's wrist and slings him over his shoulder, through the entrance, and to the ground. Izuku trips over him a second later, breaking his control. "What happened?" Hitoshi lies on the ground, laughter shaking his chest. He has dirt marks on his clothing, supposedly from when he fell. "No, seriously, Hitoshi, I can't remember anything." Hitoshi only laughs harder. Todoroki and Bakugo come through seconds later, midnight announcing their places as third and fourth. Bakugo screams and lets loose an explosion. Izuku has to beg Hitoshi to tell him what he did. The sports festival is hardly over yet. They're given a few minutes to rest before the second event. Izuku takes the time to force words out of Hitoshi in order to find out why he couldn't remember a thing about the obstacle course. "Well, it seems I forgot to tell you about one nasty little side effect of my quirk," Hitoshi says, scratching at the back of his neck. "People don't remember being brainwashed by me. They remember their response and then it's blank until they come out of it." It takes Izuku a moment to process what exactly that entailed. "You brainwashed me?" He nearly screeches. "I completely understand if you don't want to be near me again after this," Hitoshi says. Izuku was mad, sure, but not for the reasons Hitoshi thought he was. This had been his chance to show what he's got. He wanted to get through that obstacle course and scream his way into first place. Of course, Hitoshi had wanted that as well. Not the screaming bit, but he was in it to win it. He was only using what he had, after all. "That's not it," Izuku says. "I had hoped to get through on my own. Not remembering any of it kind of feels like cheating." "Not really. I never gave you any specific commands, just to get me into first place," Hitoshi mumbles. "Everything else? That was all you." Izuku pouts for a moment, but he finds himself over it fairly quickly. "Fine," he mutters, "but I don't want to see you half-butting anything out there. You got into first place because you knew what you had to do, and that running wouldn't do you any good. If you even dare look like you're not trying your best, I'll knock you out of the running." Hitoshi smiles as he always does, wide and crooked, before he holds his hand out for Izuku to take. "You better make good on that, Izuku, because I plan on beating you," he says. Izuku takes his hand in his own, his soft face now sharp with a wicked grin that doesn't quite belong. "Don't worry, Hitoshi. I will." And the second event is Midnight gestures to the screen, where a game show style wheel pops up. It spins for a few seconds before land on the cavalry battle. She says excitedly. Now, as for rules, each of you will be given headbands with your point values written on them. The lowest point value will be 5, and the point values will go up by 5 for each placement in the obstacle course. Only the first 42 placements will participate in this round. If you are to take a headband, you will place it around your neck. Any other places will be rendered null and void. This is where it gets fun, she says. The first placement in the obstacle course gets the 1 million point headband. Whoever ends up with that band by the end of the cavalry battle is pretty much guaranteed first place for this round. Hitoshi can feel eyes on his back. He knows Izuku is laughing beside him. Your teams can be no more than 4. You have 10 minutes to make your teams and plan. Begin. I'm dead, Hitoshi mutters. Hi Dead, I'm Izuku, Izuku says. Shut up. Do you want to be on team? Depends on who else asks. What do you mean? You got me during the obstacle course, Hitoshi, Izuku says, but if I get a better offer, which I likely will being one of the more powerful students in class, I may just take theirs. May I ask why? Well, seeing as you have 1 million points, your team will be the most targeted. Keep the headband, you win. Lose the headband? You're pretty much screwed. You're getting analytical on me again, Hitoshi says. It's a better plan than what you have right now though, yeah? Fair. Alright, if no one gives a better offer by the end of the 10 minutes, you'll join my team, right? Alright, but don't count your chickens before they hatch, Hitoshi. You better have a backup team member, just in case. Understood. Soon enough, Hitoshi has Ishido and Kaminari on his side, and all three are attempting to coerce Shuji into being their teammate, because the last time Hitoshi saw Izuku, he was talking to Todoroki, and that hardly boded well for Hitoshi. Those two are the most powerful in the class, Kaminari whispers. You may as well just hand over your headband now. Hell no, Hitoshi says. Izuku will kick me out of the running if I just give up. 10 minutes are up. Get into formation now. Midnight announces. Izuku finds himself facing Hitoshi, hidden by Shuji's webbed limbs, with Ishido and Kaminari at the rear. Not one of them looked to be brainwashed, but it was hard to tell with Shuji's hair covering his eyes. Izuku, on the other hand, had found himself sitting atop his own team, made up of Ida at the front, Yaoyorozu on his right, and Todoroki on his left. Todoroki claimed to be more adept with his ice, and with Ida at the front, along with the skates Yaoyorozu had made, they'd be able to speed out of danger easily. Hitoshi may have wanted to win, and he may be Izuku's dearest friend, but he's not going to roll over and hand him the victory. The horn blares and everyone starts to move. Already, Izuku's team is the most mobile. With Ida's engines pulling all their weight, they couldn't trip each other up, and with Izuku at the top, they could avoid friendly fire, especially with his ability to aim. Hitoshi's team is almost immediately targeted, with his 1 million point headband. For other teams speed after his, before they're warded off by the crackling arcs of Kaminari's electricity and Ishido's acid hissing dangerously on the ground. And they aren't even the most dangerous on the team. Izuku can appreciate the good cooperation they have, but it was painfully obvious that Hitoshi had no plan. They were simply playing it by ear. Not that Izuku had much of a plan either. He simply knew not to answer Hitoshi if asked any questions, something he had advised the rest of his team against. It'd be easy for the three that had chosen him. All three of them had carefully schooled expressions, and kept their emotions on a tight leash. Only Izuku had a smile on his face. Despite the remnants of Ishido's acid surrounding them, one team rushes towards them. The one on top talks a lot, and while Izuku can't hear him, he can see the way Hitoshi's face twists into a scowl. Hey, the blonde over there, let's try to get his band, Izuku says. Why not go after the 1 million point band? Yaoyorozu asks. And risk losing our own band with all the point-hungry teams surrounding them? Izuku remarks, no, we'd be better off stealing other people's bands while they're distracted. So long as we're 4th place or above, we get into the final event. Yaoyorozu simply nods her head, and Ida says something about having sound logic. Izuku doesn't hear. Ida powers up his engines, and they're speeding past the team, Izuku snatching the headband off of the blonde's head. In a flurry, the blonde flung himself around and grabbed at Izuku. His hand brushed his wrist, but he got no further. His eyes go wide for a moment, before he lets out a laugh. It's a sharp, neon blue noise. And it's much too loud for someone without a voice quirk. The boy screams, loud and clear, but Ida is already out of range. How many voice quirks are at this school? Ida asks, nearly yelling over the sound of the blonde's voice. That's not a voice quirk, Izuku says. No, that's most definitely not a voice quirk, not with the way that as he screams and yells and laughs, colors shift around him, ever so slightly. The tips of his hair lose their blonde hue, and turn pink, and his uniform shifts to a bright yellow. That was what it looked like when Izuku had gotten upset when he was younger. He took my quirk. He shouts, incredulously. No, not stolen, because Izuku could still grasp at the colors streaming from his lips. He'd copied it. The boy laughs and gives Izuku a look that makes him want to scream in frustration. He doesn't know why he's angry. It's only a copy. But the way he uses Izuku's quirk, all unrefined screams and wild colors. It's not right. They'd already taken his headband though, so all they could do was let him wreak havoc with his borrowed power. Ida speeds away, back to the other side of the arena, where no one is fighting for the million-point headband. The smarter students went after everyone else instead. The boy they'd robbed of points had already stolen another headband, though Izuku was too far away to see the point value. It didn't matter. So long as their headbands weren't taken, and they kept stealing more, they should get at least second place. So they wait. They're only halfway through the event, and it hardly matters if Hitoshi's team gets first place, because as long as Izuku makes it into the final event, he can beat him. Todoroki taps his leg to point out the team coming towards them. Izuku readies a scream in his throat. If he keeps scowling like this, he'll end up with wrinkles at the age of Hitoshi knows the sneer on his face is hardly enough to deter the boy in front of him, but he does so anyway. Hitoshi had met Monoma before. He was an a-hole from 1B who liked to compliment him 1 billion times a day. Why? Hitoshi doesn't think he wants to know. That doesn't matter though, because Hitoshi knows what Monoma's quirk is, and Monoma knows his. He'd managed to brush his fingers against Hitoshi's hair, but it was just enough for his quirk to register. Sharp words spill from his lips, biting at Hitoshi. Words Hitoshi has heard too often about his quirk. The scowl on his face grows deeper, as does the intense want to hit Monoma. Nonetheless, Hitoshi doesn't speak. He can't help but lighten his scowl at the irony of the situation now. Midoriya, despite having been his enemy at the moment, had been his saving grace, as his team sped by, stealing Monoma's headband from his head. However, the quirk Monoma ends up with is hardly better than Hitoshi's. He stares at the way colors change, and reality seems to bend around Monoma's voice. He knows that Monoma can use a quirk as soon as he gets it. He knows that Monoma instinctually finds the ins and outs of the quirk as soon as it finds a home under his skin. That doesn't mean he can use the quirk in the same refined way that the original user does. Hitoshi wonders if this is what Izuku would look like if he ever went berserk. He shakes the thought from his head, and instructs his team to move away while everyone else is distracted. They're only halfway through the event, after all. Izuku spares a glance at Hitoshi. They have 5 minutes left, and Hitoshi has managed to keep his headband firmly attached to his head. Izuku can't stop the wicked smile from spreading across his face. Hitoshi might be working on instinct, but he was doing a good job of it. Izuku screams, sound waves growing around him. He grasps the electrical shape of his voice, and stretches it until it fills the arena. The team stops, their front man someone with an animal quirk that looked like it gave them enhanced hearing. His hands come down to cover his ears, and their rider falls off. Todoroki snatches their headband as they speed off, handing it to Izuku. 3 minutes left. Hitoshi is cornered by 2 other teams, one of which is getting dangerously close in spite of the electricity crackling in the air and the sharp sizzle of acid hitting the ground. He can only see the rider and the person at the back. Kirishima holds Bakugu above him, weathering the lightning that arches across his rock-like skin. Izuku sees a glint of metal next to him, but there's no telling who's there. Well, with 2.5 minutes left in the game, Hitoshi doesn't need their help. The other teams are going after each other now. With Hitoshi cornered, they couldn't get to his headband. Well, Bakugo is getting close at the risk of his well-being, but Hitoshi seems to be handling that fairly well. Hitoshi says something that Izuku can't hear, but it couldn't have been good, because Bakugo's face twists in anger, and he screams at Hitoshi. His face goes blank, and he lowers his hands. Izuku can just barely see the telltale prophet's eyes speaking of Hitoshi's quirk replacing the red of Bakugo's irises. 1 minute left. Ida has gone for the evasion tactic, and Izuku doesn't blame him. They have enough points, now they just have to keep them. One team comes dangerously close, and Izuku barely avoids the vines snaking towards his head. Todoroki throws up a wall of ice at one point, to hide them from another team. There are 30 seconds left in the game. Izuku is still watching Hitoshi, closely, checking for a hand that gets too close to his headband. That's not to say Izuku isn't paying attention, but he's infinitely curious as to whether or not Hitoshi will pass. Izuku screams so loudly at a team that it drowns out the sirens signaling the end of the game. They have to wait until he stops screaming to set it off again. They call for a short break while they calculate the space between the first signal and the second, in order to find which points would have counted and which didn't. Midnight announces the break, and most participants scurry off to find water or food. Izuku tries to find Ida during the break, as he had wanted to ask about the exact mechanics of Ida's quirk. The sound his engines made didn't match up with real car engines, and the curiosity was eating him alive. He wanders down the hallway, finding Ida on the phone with someone. "Where are you?" he asks, digging into a pocket for something. The voice on the other end says something indistinguishable, the tin-colored voice barely audible from where Izuku was. Ida pulls a wallet out of his pocket, checking what's inside. "I could make it to dash." He's cut off before he can finish. "It's fine. The festival is hardly important." A pause. "Yes, I think I'll be fine taking the train." The caller seems to bid him goodbye before they hang up. Izuku waits until he stuffs his phone in his pocket and sits on the ground, tears falling down his face, to interrupt. "Ida." Ida visibly jumps, head flying up to stare at Izuku with dark eyes. "Are you all right?" Ida doesn't answer for a moment, looking back down at his hands in his lap again, before he speaks. "How much did you hear?" He mumbles. "A lot, but not enough to know what's going on," Izuku says. "But you have to leave, right?" Ida nods his head, silently. "Could you?" Ida stops himself, rewording before he continues. "Please don't tell anyone about this." Izuku simply sits down next to him instead of answering. "I don't want our classmates to find out, but the news will say something," he says. "Please just keep quiet about this. You don't even know yet, and I'd like to keep it that way for everyone else." "Okay," Izuku says, voice tiny. "I won't say a word, but I want you to listen to me for a moment. Don't you dare keep this all to yourself." Izuku's voice is quiet, but the way he looks Ida in the eye conveys emotions that can't be explained. "You talk to someone. I don't know what happened yet, but I don't want you to fall apart all on your own. Please, promise me you'll talk to someone." Ida is silent, staring at Izuku. He nods his head, gaze dropping back to his hands. "I promise," he says, voice. Well, Izuku smiles and leans against the wall. Ida stands up, offering a hand to Izuku, which he rejects in favor of resting a bit longer. "I have to go." His voice cracks in a way that makes Izuku want to stop him so that he can cry. "I won't be competing in the rest of the festival. I'll see you." Izuku waves him off, hoping that Ida keeps his promise. He can't help but think he'll hurt himself. Their break isn't quite over yet, and Izuku finds himself wandering the halls, waiting for the PA system to announce the end of the break. He walks down to the waiting rooms, now just searching for someone to talk to. He can't help but want Kaminari to hug him simply for sake of hugging. Rather than finding Kaminari, Izuku finds one NG Todoroki, pulling his son aside, presumably to speak with him. Izuku should really stop listening in on other people's conversations. He stays where he is, just around the corner, in the doorway to the waiting room, so he can run off should Endeavor decide to storm away mid-conversation. He catches the dark red of Endeavor's voice, drastically contrasting with Todoroki's blue-gray, hot with anger. "What the hell was that out there?" he asks. "I didn't see you using your fire at all." "I told you," Todoroki says, "I will win this without using your power. I don't need it." "You will use it, boy," Endeavor snarls. "You won't get anywhere without it. You can't use half of your abilities and expect to win." "I can and I will," Todoroki says. His voice is cold, dark in a way that makes Izuku shiver. It's not right. Endeavor's anger is almost visible in his voice, the way it shakes with concealed rage and glows hot like coals. Izuku steps around the corner before anything else can happen. Todoroki looks over at him the moment he spots him in his peripheral vision, eyes wide. "Ah, Todoroki," Izuku starts, "I was looking for you." The smile on Izuku's face is fake, strained. It didn't quite reach his eyes. Endeavor never took notice. He left with only a few final words to his son. "You will lose like this," he says before he stalks off, anger radiating off of him. "Sorry, I wasn't really looking for you. I just wanted to get you away from him," Izuku says. "You don't need that kind of stress before the next event." "Izuku," he starts, "you were simply born with power, yes? Kind of? I always had the potential to do the things I can do now, but I wasn't always able to do that. My quirk is simply versatile, and I suppose I've been trying to find workarounds for every little thing." "So you trained?" "Of course. I wouldn't be where I was now if I hadn't," Izuku says. "Where are you going with this?" Todoroki is quiet, eyes staring off at something that isn't there. "I don't know," he mutters. "I just thought." He stops, but Izuku can nearly see the words on the tip of his tongue, dark gray, low and wobbly, begging for someone to hear them. "You were like me." The words are left unsaid, and Izuku is left in fear, wondering what they could possibly mean. "Never mind. I apologize for stopping you," Todoroki says. His voice is stronger now, but it warbles in a way that makes Izuku want to hold him. The break should be over soon. "Would you happen to know where Shinso is?" "No, I'm sorry. I was originally looking for him when I came over here, but I've had no luck," Izuku says. Todoroki nods his head and turns to walk away, before Izuku stops him. "DMN this bleeding heart," he thinks. "Ah, Todoroki, if you ever need to talk to someone, well, I know we're not exactly close or anything, I just dash." Izuku has to stop to string the words together properly. "Don't just hide away or anything. You don't have to deal with things alone." Todoroki gives him a withering look and walks away with no response. Izuku can't make his legs follow him, so he turns and leaves instead. Just a few minutes later, Present Mic issues a 5-minute warning for students to get back to the arena, so that the last event can be explained to them. Izuku finds his way back through the winding corridors to the arena, where a few other students have already converged. Kaminari stood there, searching for someone, supposedly a Shido or Hitoshi. Instead he finds Midoriya, and bounds over anyway. "Hey Mido," he says, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. "Where'd you run off to during break?" "I was looking for you." Ah, so he hadn't been looking for a Shido or Hitoshi, Midoriya thinks. "I was speaking with Todoroki. He needed to find Hitoshi, but I couldn't find him either," Midoriya says. He doesn't want to tip anyone off about Ida, so he doesn't say anything. "Oh," Kaminari mutters. "Anyway, what did Todoroki even want to talk about?" "I dunno, and in truth he didn't, but it still made him nervous." Todoroki had seemed angry when he asked about Hitoshi. Izuku had a feeling that if Todoroki had found Hitoshi, the conversation that came out of it would do no good. Ashido appears next, Hitoshi following after, just barely making it before a siren blared alerting everyone of the end of their break. Midnight appears on her podium again, greeting them with a short explanation of why the break had been so long. Alright, the next and final event is. The roulette wheel spins, landing on a section labeled one-on-one battles. The one-on-one battles, she announces. The bracket will be put up on the screen, so that you can see who will be fighting who. There will be 4 rounds of battles, with the last round determining the winner of the festival overall. The first fight is. She waits for the bracket to appear on screen. The first battle highlighted in gold, Monoma Nito and Bakugu Katsuki. Well, that fight would certainly be interesting. Already he can see Bakugo screaming at Monoma for stealing his quirk. The students are led to their seats among the audience, waiting for the first fight to begin. Present Mike announces the fight for a second time, likely just for the sake of continuity. The two step out of the tunnels leading to the arena entrance, standing on either side of the platform. There are two ways to win, Midnight says. Either push your opponent out of the barrier, or force your opponent to surrender. If at any point I believe that either of you are going too far, I will stop the fight. Monoma and Bakugo both nod in understanding before stepping onto the platform. With the sound of the horn, the fight begins. Bakugo rushes forwards, a hand held in the air above him, sparking with barely contained explosions. It hardly matters. Bakugo doesn't know what Monoma's quirk is. Monoma rushes towards him at the same speed, no hesitation visible on his face. His outstretched hand grabs Bakugo's wrist, uncaring of the full-sized explosions crackling at his fingertips. In only seconds, Monoma's free hand is doing the same. They're not quite the same. Bakugo handles his explosions carefully, using them at the right times in the right places. Monoma is unskilled with Bakugo's quirk. He's all wild haymakers and unrefined punches. Nitroglycerin lights itself in his hands, but he's not sure how to use it. Despite all this, there's a self-assured smile on his face as he aims for Bakugo's face again. It's all for naught. Bakugo dodges him, grasping his arm and throwing him bodily to the side. Monoma lands sprawling, just before the line painted on the edges of the platform. He scrambles up, hands sparking. He throws a hand backwards, seemingly in an attempt to copy a similar move from Bakugo, but Monoma doesn't know Bakugo's quirk. He aims wrong, and lands in such a way that pops his shoulder out of its socket. He cries out in pain, and Bakugo takes the opportunity to grab him and practically throw him over the edge of the platform. Midnight announces Bakugo the winner, and the crowd cheers for him. He's led off the platform, while Monoma is taken by one of Ectoplasm's clones to the infirmary. Cementos repairs the pieces of the platform that had been chipped off, and the next fight is announced. The fight between Yaoyorozu and Ibra is fairly uneventful, Ibra using her vines to her advantage, where Yaoyorozu had been unprotected. Neither party is severely injured. The same went for the fight between Hitoshi and Tokoyami. Tokoyami had attacked hard at first, but Hitoshi had likely spoken some hurtful words, causing Tokoyami to begin to yell at him in retaliation. Izuka had gone off to find Hitoshi and find out exactly what he had said, but instead found him apologizing profusely to Tokoyami, saying that he hadn't meant it, and he panicked when Tokoyami hadn't been responding to anything else. Tokoyami accepted his apology and walked away soon after, saying something about needing to tend to Dark Shadow's agitation. Hitoshi turned around, just to find Izuku leaning against the wall, smiling brightly. "You heard that whole conversation, didn't you?" "Is just the important bits," Izuku says. "So, what do you want?" He deadpans. "Well, I was going to ask exactly what you said to make Tokoyami react like that," he starts, "but I think it's better if I don't." "Probably. What I said was kind of personal," Hitoshi says. He raises his hands to interlock the fingers behind his neck, almost a double of his usual nervous tick. Anyway, Izuku is interrupted by Present Mike announcing Kirishima the winner of the match. "You need to get going," Hitoshi says. "Your match is next, isn't it?" After this one actually, Shiro Hanta and Pony Tsunatori are introduced over the speakers. "But yeah, I need to go." "See you," he calls out as Izuku walks away, hopefully on the platform. "Get to the last round and we'll see," Izuku jokes, before he rushes off to the waiting area. Shiro and Pony had an uneventful fight. He's a long-range fighter, which gave him an advantage over Pony's short-range fighting style. Her horns were wrapped up in his tape pretty quickly, and she was thrown out of bounds. Shiro is announced the winner, and Izuku makes his way to the entrance, where his opponent waits on the other side. Present Mike announces their names. He's fighting against someone named Kendo. Izuku has never met them, but they haven't met him either. They both walk out until they meet in the middle of the arena. "All right, midnight starts. You've heard the rules. Get your opponent outside the barrier, or make them surrender." I will stop you if either of you go too far. They both nod in affirmation before they move back to opposite sides of the platform. Present Mike announces the beginning of the fight, and almost immediately, Izuku is rushed by Kendo, whose hands are growing larger by the second. This should be fairly easy, Izuku thinks. Colors aren't too hard for him to control, but they're still more difficult than sound. Colors are more abstract, and it's hard to find the right wavelength to create the color he wants. So Izuku doesn't deal with illusions. He just blinds his enemies. Kendo's eyes are blue, with dark, pinprick pupils in the center, from the bright sunlight. Darkness draws in light. It's why pupils are black, to draw in light from their surroundings. So to blind someone, you take out their pupils. Black is an easy color to grab. It isn't really a color, just the absence of color. It has no wavelength of its own. It's a simple thing to grasp it in his hands and turn it white. Kendo's eyes go wide, unseeing, as she stumbles past him, nearly past the barrier. She's close, but she stops herself. It hardly matters. Izuku feels no remorse when he shoves her past it. Her lack of sight had caused disorientation, so she was unbalanced as it is. It almost feels cruel to let her lose like this. He changes her eyes back, taking the bright waves of her white pupils, and turning them down until she can see properly again. She looks at him from her spot on the ground, staring up at him in confusion, until he offers his hand to help her up. "Sorry about blinding you," he mumbles, gnawing on the inside of his cheek. "I probably would have done the same," she answers, with a smile bright as the sun. Present Mike announces his win over the speakers, and they're led off of the platform and back into the building. "Hey," she starts, "what's your quirk? I thought you had a voice quirk." "Oh, it's called wave control. I blinded you by turning your pupils white, which I could only do because I can mess with wavelengths." "That's incredibly versatile," she says. "So, is it just sound and light waves or other things too? I recently found out about brain waves, but I can't do that very well." Otherwise, Izuku stops himself for a moment. "Well, I have no idea why I could do. It's a bit strange to know your quirk could do so much more, but have no idea what." Kendo laughs for a moment, before she speaks. "Well, at least you have such a versatile quirk. All I have is big hands." She raises her hands to showcase the rapid growth, though they're powerful in their own right. "It's Suka!" A voice down the hall yells. Izuku recognizes that voice, full of sharp grays and ice-cold blues. "Ah, that's Monoma, isn't it?" "Is. How'd you know?" Kendo asks. Though, it seems more rhetorical than anything. "I don't really recognize people by their faces," he mutters. "Yeah, I noticed that when I copied your quirk," Monoma says when he finally reaches them. "Everything I heard had colors that went with it. It was really trippy. I bumped into that Class A girl with the invisibility. I copied it because the Bakugo guy decided he wasn't satisfied with our fight. I've been pretending to be her every time he passes by, but I'm almost out of time." He rambles. Kendo it quiet for a moment, before she responds with a little hum, and says, "Well, I can't help you there." "How'd you even lose?" "I thought he just had a sound quirk," Monoma grumbles. "You copied his quirk. Work it out yourself. Or ask." Kendo snarks as she turns to go to one of the waiting rooms. "I'm gonna go call my moms, so play nice you too," she jokes, walking away. Monoma flickers into being again a few seconds later. "So, how'd you do it?" "Is. You copied my quirk, right?" Izuku starts. Monoma nods his head, prompting him to continue. "It's not just sound. I control waves in general, including color waves. I blinded her by turning her pupils white." Monoma lets out a little, "oh," at the revelation, before he continues to speak. "Well, if it were just hand-to-hand combat, she would have beat the sheet out of you," he says. "I don't doubt it," Izuku mutters. "Anyway, I want to see the last few fights before the next round starts." Present Mike had already announced the beginning of Ishido's and Tetsutetsu's fight, commentating on the way Ishido used her acid in the fight, and Izuku wanted to see the rest. "Hopefully I'll see you in a non-combative scenario," he jokes. "Sure. Maybe you're not as bad as your classmates," he mutters before he walks off. Izuku rushes back upstairs, into the stands, and sits down next to Shiro. What did I miss? He asks, barely able to hear himself over the roar of the crowd. Not much, he says. Ashido seems to be winning. Steel isn't immune to acid, so she's pushing him out of bounds. Izuku nods his head with a soft hum, and soon enough, the fight is over. Ashido is decreed the winner, and the next fight begins a minute later. Kaminari Denki vs Todoroki Shudo. Present Mike shouts. Kaminari and Todoroki step out. Midnight explains the rules again, and the two of them position themselves on opposite ends of the arena. Kaminari tries to shock Todoroki, but it's all in vain. Todoroki sends up a glacier in seconds, ice creaking against the ground, the bone-deep groan of the earth rumbling settles in Izuku's body. That's a sound he'll have to put in one of his notebooks. Kaminari yields, and Todoroki is announced the winner. He soon sets to work melting the ice, and a break is called before the next round. The moment Kaminari is out of the ice, he crashes into Izuku, who had been attempting to find Ashido in order to congratulate her on her win. Midoriya. He whines, I'm cold, so cold. Kaminari pretends to faint in his arms, acting overly dramatic. Though his skin is ice cold. Considering the weather, he should warm up soon enough. I think you'll be fine, he jokes. Hey, Midoriya, you control colors, right? Izuku nods his head as an answer. Could you, theoretically, give me a sweet tan? I might accidentally turn you neon pink, Izuku says. Ah, Kaminari pouts. Well, when you can control your colors better, you ought to give me a nice tan so I can get a hot date. If you don't already have a tan by the time I can control colors, I'll give you a tan, Izuku jokes. Midoriya. And suddenly Ashido had jumped him from behind, almost making him land on Kaminari. Hi. Hello to you too, Izuku mumbles. Where's Shinso? She asks, wanna give him a good luck kiss on the cheek before his next fight. No fair. Kaminari says, I wanna give him kiss on the cheek. Your kisses aren't good luck. Ashido sticks her tongue out at Kaminari, teasing him. Doesn't mean I can't kiss him. Guys, I don't know where Hitoshi is. Please keep me out of your love triangle. Boo! Kaminari jeers. Ashido finally clambers down off of his back, and Kaminari twists to get out of his arms. You two are going to kill me at this rate, Izuku jokes. Anyway, what were you doing before I came along? Looking for you, actually. I wanted to congratulate you on your win, Izuku says. Ah, thanks. Ashido slings an arm around his shoulders, barely able to do so with her few inches over him. I don't think I'll win against Todoroki though. Yeah. Did you see what he did to me? Kaminari says. I'm pretty sure that if I beat him, I'd die right after. That's no way to think of yourself. Hitoshi had appeared behind Ashido, leaning against the wall. Shinso! Ashido shouts, before she turns around and throws her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him off his feet. You did well in your fight, she says. Don't you have to fight Kirishima next? Kaminari asks. Yep, and if I win that one, I'll either be fighting Bakugo or Ibara. Neither of which look good for me. Well, this is just why I was trying to find you. It looked like you were torturing Izuku Dash. Shoo! Ashido says, laughing at herself. I was trying to find you first. She lets him get back to his feet before she lets go of him. Obviously, because you're going up against Kirishima, and then another powerhouse if you win, you deserve not one, but 2 good luck kisses, Ashido explains, as though it were a well-known fact. Izuku, I didn't know you were in love with me, Hitoshi jokes. Not me. He splutters out, that's all them. He points to Kaminari and Ashido, who have made it their mission to beg Hitoshi into SBMson. Ah, he fakes a look of thought for a moment before he speaks again. Okay, I'll let you both give me a good luck kiss on the cheek. Kaminari laughs triumphantly, before he tugs Hitoshi down to plant a kiss on his cheek. Ashido leaves a kiss on the other side, before she grabs Kaminari's hand and drags him off, shouting, good luck. Behind her. They do know I'm not in the first fight, right? Hitoshi asks. Maybe they wanted to make sure it got to you, so they did it early. Hitoshi nods in understanding and turns back to Izuku. So, I probably shouldn't say this, But, should you get the chance, you might want to talk to Todoroki. I'm in no place to talk about his problems, but he needs help. What's wrong with him? Izuku asks. Like I said, I'm not in a place to say, but considering how you talk about your own father. Hitoshi trails off. Well, I just think you'd be in a better position to talk some sense into him before he hurts himself. Just from those words alone, Izuku is worried. His own father had been bad to say the least. Inko had divorced him 3 years after Izuku was born. While Izuku couldn't remember much of him, what he did remember made him scared. Hisashi had not been a good man. Inko made sure Hisashi left for that very reason. That was the end of the story, and the only way to pry anything out of Izuku was by offering up information of your own. Hitoshi had done just that. While he explained his adoption, and how his biological parents had abandoned him due to his quirk, he never said a thing about who he'd been adopted by. Izuku had never met them, and Hitoshi didn't want to talk about the Yamada household, so they didn't talk about it. Okay, Izuku says, voice quiet, I'll try to find him later. The next round should be starting soon. Right, I'm gonna hang out in the waiting room since I'm second, he says. Okay, I'll try to stick around long enough to see if you win, Izuku mutters. He tries to find his way back to his seat, though he likely won't stay for long. He plans to stay in the waiting room when Bakugu's and Ibra's fight ends. At least there he can watch Hitoshi's fight on the screen. Something leads him in another direction. Endeavor stands outside one of the waiting rooms, tapping his foot impatiently. Izuku has a feeling he knows why. It's the same waiting room that has his locker, the same one he planned to wait in, but that's not why the senior Todoroki is there. Izuku steps up next to him. He's standing too close to the door to let anyone outside through. Excuse me, he starts. Endeavor gives him a glare that could rival Bakugu's. My phone is in there. I told my mom I'd call her. It's a lie, but it's not as though Endeavor can disprove it. He grunts and moves to the side, allowing Izuku through. Izuku pulls the door open and slips inside, before Endeavor can change his mind. Todoroki sits inside at the table, trying to rub the tear tracks off of his cheeks. I don't want to finji talk to you, he says, before he looks up, and sees Izuku standing in front of him, rather than Endeavor. Oh, the fight rages on the television screen. Ibra turned out to be a fierce opponent for Bakugu. Todoroki schools his face, looking stoic and cold, save for the drying tear tracks on his cheeks. Hey, Izuku says, Hitoshi said I might need to talk you out of something stupid, but he didn't give me any details. Todoroki snorts, a short, harsh thing, before he speaks. What I said to Shinso is none of your business. You can leave it alone. He kind of gave a hint that it was a father issue, and judging by the way Endeavor is standing outside the door, I don't doubt it. He had no right to talk about it, Todoroki says, voice quiet. I know. I don't know what's happening, but we have time before I have to go out and fight, if you want to talk, Izuku says. Todoroki stays quiet, staring down at his hands, resting on the table. It doesn't involve you. It involves my friend, and therefore involves me by extension. That's not how it works, he mumbles. I don't want you to suffer in silence, Todoroki. He doesn't speak. He doesn't utter a word for a solid 2 minutes. Ibra lands a strike that almost sends Bakugu out of bounds, and Bakugu retaliates by lighting her vines alight. Have you ever heard of quirk marriages? Yes. A lot of second and third generation quirk carriers got involved in them to create more powerful children, Izuku says. My father forced my mother into one. He tried to get the perfect combination of quirks 3 times before I was born. Izuku stands in silence, stunned at the revelation. He forced me to train so that I could eventually beat All Might. My mother couldn't help but see the worst in me. She compared my left side to my father, called it unsightly, and poured boiling water on my face, he says, trailing off towards the end. His scar made sense now. She was sent to a mental hospital. I haven't seen her in years. You can tell someone, Izuku starts. You could get him put away for what he did. Tuya tried to, he mutters. Tuya tried to arrange a court case against our father, but Endeavor won, and Tuya disappeared soon after. A million scenarios run through Izuku's head, trying desperately to find one that worked in Todoroki's favor. He couldn't just ignore what Endeavor did. Izuku hardly remembered his own father, but what he did remember had caused panic attacks, in fear of things that could no longer hurt him. Now I just want to surpass him without his power. I don't want to give him the satisfaction. Your friend seems to think otherwise though. Well, you'd be doing what he wants anyway, Izuku says. Why become a hero at all? Because despite what he wants. Todoroki trails off. I still want to help people. I don't have the right kind of quirk to be a doctor, and police work these days is mostly legal papers and office work. Being a hero is the only option. Then don't surpass him. Become a hero and do it your way. It's still your quirk, not his. Todoroki is silent for a moment. I'll consider that, but for now, I just want him to die. Izuku nods his head, and Present Mic announces Bakugo as the winner again. Okay, Izuku mumbles, okay, but please, don't let him consume your life. Try not to think of him at all. You don't have to give him that power. He knows their experiences aren't the same, that they aren't afraid of fire for the same reasons. He knows that Endeavor had a purpose behind his actions, a bad purpose, but a purpose nonetheless. Izuku's father hurt just to watch him cry. Izuku turns to leave, walking towards the door, before Todoroki stops him. Thank you, he says before he let go of his arm. Izuku opens the door. Endeavor no longer stands in the way. He'd likely gone off to do something else. Shinsu's fight starts on the television, but Izuku thinks he's overstayed his welcome. Shinso loses the fight, surprisingly enough. Kirishima had somehow broken out of his hold, and body slammed him out of bounds. So Izuku will fight against Kirishima in the next round. However, for now, he fights against Zero. It almost feels dirty to use the same trick that he used on Kendo, but if it's effective, then he should use it. Zero's eyes are dark. Izuku can't quite tell the difference between the irises and the pupils from so far away. He grasps the color altogether, because the irises and the pupils blend together so perfectly, turning the wavelength up until his eyes have faded to white, until the sclera and iris blend together, until Zero has the blind prophet's eyes. He's blind now, head spinning, trying desperately to get a feel for his surroundings, though there is nothing close enough for him to touch. It's easy to shove him over the edge as well, into the grass, as Present Mic announces his second win. It takes him a moment to find Zero's irises, just barely darker than the sclera. He has to grab his face in his hands to hold him still. It doesn't stop his eyes from flickering about, but it's enough to grab the dusty gray color he's created and bring back the old black eyes that had always been there. The moment he can see again, Izuku pulls him up off of the ground. They walk off into the building, making room for the next fight. They turn a corner, and Zero stops him. What's wrong? Izuku asks. Zero doesn't say anything. Instead, he wraps his arms around Izuku, pulling him close, and burying his face in Izuku's shoulder. Please never do that again, he whispers, chest shaking. Izuku winds his arms around Zero's waist, running one hand up and down his back. Okay, he says, I swear I won't do that again. And Izuku means it. With the way Zero's chest rattles, the way his tears soak the shoulder of Izuku's shirt. Perhaps it's just a primal fear of the dark. Perhaps it's something else. Izuku won't ask. They miss Ishido's and Todoroki's fight too. Todoroki won, freezing her to the ground. Izuku doesn't mind missing it. Not when there are more important things to attend to, like the panic attack the Zero is just coming out of. He's scarily quiet, rubbing the remnants of tears off of his face. I'm sorry about all that, he mumbles. I don't know what came over me. It's okay, Izuku says. You were scared, it's fine. He doesn't tell Zero that he thought it was a panic attack. That might make it worse. They're given a shorter break before the next round. The first fight would be Bakugo and Kirishima. The second would be Izuku and Todoroki. I mean, it's not okay, but thank you anyway, Zero says. Izuku doesn't try to fight him on it. The next fight should be starting in a few minutes. Izuku says, will you be all right? Zero laughs, all traces of the previous panic attack gone, save for the redness in his eyes. I'll be fine, he says. Don't worry, I'm not a little kid. Okay, Izuku let go of him, allowing him to walk back to his seat in the audience. Izuku goes back to the waiting area instead, where he finds Hitoshi on the phone. He sits at one of the foldable tables after digging his phone out of his locker. He won't have long to stay anyway, considering Bakugu's win streak. Hitoshi hangs up a few moments later, stuffing his phone in his pocket. "Hey," he mumbles, sitting down across from Izuku, who's tapping away at some game on his phone. "Hi." Izuku turns the phone off, sliding it away from himself. "So, how'd you lose?" Hitoshi seems to become frustrated even thinking about how he lost. "I don't know," he says, voice low. I had him under, but he just, what kind of effing quirk dash?" Hitoshi cuts himself off with a groan. He broke his effing fingers to get out of it. Like, you know how he has that weird rock thing going on? He cracked it, nearly took his own fingers off, just to break out. And then, he just picked me up and threw me out of bounds. Hitoshi buries his face in his hands and yells into them. "So you're obviously a bit sad about it," Izuku says. Hitoshi puts his head against the table and screams at Izuku in answer. "So, when he broke his fingers, he grabbed his own fingers and snapped them?" That's the thing. Hitoshi mumbles against the table, finally lifting his head up to talk to Izuku. He didn't snap them in half on his own. He literally flicked them and sent out this fing shockwave. Next thing I knew, his fingers were bent in all the wrong places, and he was throwing me over the line. That's Izuku starts, but he's interrupted by Present Mike announcing that Bakugu won the fight. That's weird, because his quirk is called hardening. Hitoshi snorts, and Izuku gives him a glare. "I have to go. My fight is next," he says. "I'll talk to you later." Izuku makes it to the entrance, just in time for Present Mike to announce his name. Todoroki is already on the platform, waiting for Izuku. Izuku rushes out to meet him in the middle, Midnight standing between them, explaining the rules again as a refresher. She walks away, and the two of them are directed to opposite ends of the arena. A horn blares, and in seconds, Izuku finds himself nearly encased in ice. The groan of the glacier is a chest-deep noise that rattles his bones. The crowd around them is loud, crying out, waiting for him to yield. No, he won't. Not yet. He grasps the noise of the voices closest to him, dragging them in, stretching and manipulating the waves to his will. He wraps it about the ice, feeling it shake, searching desperately for the right frequency. The ice rattles until it shatters around him, cutting his skin. It's not enough to hinder him. The crowd grows louder still, even as he keeps his tenuous hold on the nameless voices. Todoroki almost seemed surprised, based on the stance he had taken. Another round of ice, shattered by voices Izuku had stolen for the moment. He's found the right frequency to shatter ice at will. He can see the conflict in Todoroki's eyes. Izuku is forcing him to use his fire. He can see the way Todoroki's hands shake, the frost that forms on his right side, creeping over to his left. He's afraid to. More ice is shattered, and Izuku finds himself moving forwards. He's halfway across the platform before another round of ice is sent forwards. Todoroki is slowing down, shaking weaker. Izuku wants to help him. He wants to tug him up until he's on his feet, wants to carry him along until he can walk again. But he can't, because nothing is so simple. Izuku stands in front of Todoroki, too close for him to use his ice without freezing himself in it. "Don't let him consume you," he says, creating a barrier of their own, so that no microphones could pick up his voice. "Please," he whispers, "don't let him influence you. It's not his power. It's yours." And with two simple words, Todoroki bursts into flame. Izuku throws himself back, desperate to get away from the heat. Frost melts, and Izuku finds his hands and arms were burnt, from where he had stood. Too close to Todoroki. By all technicality, Izuku should be able to control fire. It's plasma, a waveform, but plasma is too wild, too unpredictable. He can't tame it. Though Todoroki can't either. The flames whip around his body in a beautiful display of power, scorching everything they touch. Slowly, the cold air in the stadium dissipates, replaced with the burning of the fire. As afraid of fire as Izuku is, He thinks he has a new appreciation for the bright crackling of Todoroki's flames. Because Todoroki's flames mean strength. Todoroki's flames empower, letting him stand tall, even as tears streak down his face. "Thank you," he says, voice softer than a whisper, hidden under the noise of the fire. Izuku hears it all the same. Still, it doesn't mean he can give up now. He wanted to win this, didn't he? Izuku scrambles up, off of the ground. He can't control the fire, but he can neutralize it. He remembers an old video he's watched at home, curious about just how many ways he could use sound. He had a notebook dedicated to it when he was younger. Now though, all he can think of is a low, dark, chest-deep sound that could put out fires. All he has to do is replicate it. Voices tangled in his hands, he pulls at the waves, stretching them out into the sound he wants. The voices are still there, still pulsing through the sound, but they're indistinguishable now, unable to be understood. He pushes the sound towards Todoroki, straining to keep the bass low enough to put out the flames. It does its job, flames calming, pushed down by the sound around them. Todoroki pushes them harder, desperately trying to shove the flames past the voices. Izuku knows he can't. He tastes metal in the back of his throat, warning him of the nosebleed he's sure to have later, as well as the migraine he'll suffer after it's all over. He ignores it, pulling sound waves until they make his chest rattle dangerously and blood drips down his face, until the flames disappear and Todoroki yields, unable to use his quirk in the face of the bone-shattering noise. The horn blares, and Izuku drops the voices, allowing them to snap back into place with their owners. Izuku drops to his hands and knees moments later, breathing hard. One hand rises to his face, holding his nose, dripping with blood. He sees one of Ectoplasm's clones out of the corner of his eye, a hand held out to help him up. Izuku takes his hand in his own, careful to use the one that wasn't covered in blood. He's pulled up, and the clone wraps an arm around Izuku's waist, supporting him as they walked to the infirmary. His nose won't stop bleeding, and he can't help but feel like there's going to be a longer break between the two fights now. Recovery Girl is quick to heal him, warning him that quirk overuse could easily be deadly for him. He heeds her warnings to monitor himself in fights. Nosebleeds were oftentimes just a symptom, not the whole problem. She said they would schedule an MRI for a later date, because Izuku had already overused his quirk twice in his short time at the school. She sent him back out with a kiss on the cheek and a word of caution. There had been a 20-minute intermission between fights, just so Izuku could rest for a bit. Though, Bakugo had apparently broken an arm in his own fight, so Izuku knew he wasn't the only own that needed to heal. 10 minutes later, break used up, Present Mike announced their fight. Izuku stands at one end of the platform, dried blood still present on his face. He hadn't been able to scrub all of it off of him. Bakugo stood at the other end, glaring at Izuku, as though Izuku had wronged him in the worst way possible just by existing. It didn't matter. Izuku could still win. But as he stared into Bakugo's eyes, bright red and angry, Izuku can't quite find it in himself to stand up straight. Midnight explains the rule for a final time, and the two of them are sent to opposite ends of the arena. Izuku's hands fist at his sides, nails digging into his palms. He's afraid for more than one reason. Bakugo, at the other end, has his hands ready at his sides. Izuku can see it in his stance, the way he has explosions ready at his fingertips. He can hear the phantom crack of nitroglycerin being ignited, can see the burning colors in the corner of his vision. He can feel his throat burning, can feel Bakugo's hand choking him, can see Bakugo lying on the ground screaming, begging for Izuku to stop. No, he hadn't begged before. Izuku stops the thought before it can go any further. The horn blares, and Bakugo launches himself forwards. Izuku's breath catches in his throat, as he dodges an explosion larger than himself aimed at his head. He dove to the side, and Bakugo stopped just in front of the barrier. His pupils are pinpricks, swallowed by the pure, bright red in his eyes. Izuku can't grasp the colors in his fear. He tries desperately to grab the black like he had with Kendo, with Zero, and yet, the color flies out of his grasp, refusing to submit to his whims. He doesn't want to use sound. He doesn't want to hurt Bakugo again. But the way Bakugo looks at him, with a goal to hurt, he feels like he'll have to. Bakugo runs at him, explosions propelling him forwards between steps. Izuku screams. Bright, istingy yellow falls from his lips, growing in size and encasing him. No, he won't touch Bakugo, but he can create a barrier. Bakugo stops just outside of his wall of sound. He feels the vibration in the air, even though he hasn't touched the wall yet. He can't hear Izuku screaming without walking through the barrier. He holds a hand out, forcing it through the sound, bones rattling under flesh. His hand shakes, but he fires off an explosion all the same. Stops only an inch short from his hand. He tries again, firing off a more powerful one. It too stops only inches from its starting point. He keeps firing off explosions rapid fire, more and more powerful each time. They were snuffed out by the wailing of Izuku's voice. He could hear the murmuring of the crowd, present Mike commentating something about Izuku's quirk, explaining the specifics of his sound barrier. It hardly mattered. Izuku wasn't looking at him. He just kept screaming. He had to stop at some point, didn't he? Bakugo doesn't care. He stops the explosions, reaching into the barrier instead, to grab Izuku's hair. Izuku stops screaming. Bakugo slams his head into his knee. He can hear the crowd gasp, many of them whispering to one another about the brutality of it. Izuku hadn't been knocked unconscious by it, but it left him dazed for a moment. His hands claw at Bakugo's in a mockery of the battle trials, leaving angry red marks from his nails. He tries to get his feet under him, sitting on one knee, and trying desperately to push himself up off the ground. His quirk doesn't even cross his mind. He's too afraid of what will happen. Bakugo, lying on the ground, bleeding from the ears. Siro, crying, begging him never to blind him like he did. He can never seem to stop hurting people with his quirk. Bakugo doesn't move, letting Midoriya struggle, pushing him back down each time. His face meets Bakugo's knee again, and Izuku can feel blood again. They start whispering in the crowd, asking why Bakugo didn't just end it already. Midoriya wasn't moving, so why not just drag him over the edge of the line? Again, Bakugo hits him, punching him in the face this time. Blood drips from his nose, and wells up in his now split lip. He still refuses to use his quirk. What the hell's your game, Deku? Bakugo asks, why the hell do you think you can just sit here without fighting me? Izuku doesn't answer. Bakugo hits him. Someone is whispering in the crowd. The teachers need to stop him, don't they? Effing fight me, bastard. He roars. I yield, Izuku whispers. Bakugo stands there in stunned silence for a moment, before he speaks again. What the F did you just say? I yield. Izuku shouts now, trying to be sure that someone hears him. Present Mike is quick to announce Bakugo the winner, but the fight hardly ends there. Hell no. Bakugo shouts, you can't just effa yield. Stand up and fight me, fucker. He shouts. His fist meets the side of Izuku's head, knocking him down when Bakugo releases the grip he has on his hair. Izuku hits the ground, and curls up in a ball instinctively, ready to take whatever beating Bakugo will give him. Get the hell up. He shouts, I'll decide when you're done fighting. Stand the F up and fight me like you did during the battle trials. You beat me then, and you can beat me now. Izuku doesn't answer. He takes every hit Bakugo gives him. It almost seems like midnight ended the fight too late. Izuku can faintly smell the sweet aroma of her quirk, before everything goes dark. When Izuku wakes up, he's in the infirmary, with Recovery Girl muttering something about 2 nosebleeds in under an hour. He's still in his sports festival uniform, lying on top of scratchy blankets. Recovery Girl? He asks, voice rough. Took you long enough, she says. Now, I can't heal you immediately. You're too weak. Can you stand? Izuku sits up slowly, and swings his legs over the side of the bed. It's easy to stand up, but staying up wasn't as simple. It takes him a moment to gain his balance, but he's ultimately able to walk. Bakugo actually hadn't done that much damage, save for Izuku's now broken nose and split lip. He'd likely have some nasty bruises later, but he had no concussion, so he was given the clear to walk back to the arena for the medals ceremony. The ceremony is almost over in a flash. He didn't get the chance to stop and talk to anyone before he was led down to the platform by one of Ectoplasm's clones. It had been waiting outside the door for Izuku to come out of the infirmary. He's directed to the second-place platform. Todoroki stands at the other side. Bakugo remains missing for the moment. Then the first-place platform opens up with a pillar rising out of it. A pillar with Bakugo attached, struggling against the chains and cuffs they've used to restrain him. Izuku feels bad. He feels as though he caused it when he hadn't fought. He feels like he antagonized Bakugo when he yielded. He doesn't have time to lament it though, because Present Mike announces his name, and All Might stands in front of him, a medal held up to go over his head. Izuku bows his head to allow him to slip the silver medal around his neck, and smiles respectfully when the crowd cheers. His thoughts rage in his head, pity and anger and every emotion in between. He silences them instead. Bakugo tries to refuse his medal, yelling something about a rematch, and making sure Izuku fights him. All Might leaves the medal hanging from his teeth instead of fighting him on the matter. The ceremony ends after a few more minutes of standing there and smiling for cameras, before Izuku and Todoroki are led away, while Bakugo has to be manhandled into a waiting room. When they're finally left alone in the room to change into their regular clothing and go home, Todoroki stops him before he leaves. "Midoriya?" he asks, a hand on Izuku's shoulder. He stops, and Izuku can see him chewing on the inside of his cheek. "Thank you," it's a soft whisper, nearly inaudible. Izuku smiles kindly, and Todoroki almost looks scared, just for a moment. "You don't have to thank me, Todoroki," he mumbles. I still feel resentment towards my flames, however. I think you helped, and in my eyes, that deserves thanks." Todoroki won't look him in the eye, staring at his feet instead. His hand had dropped to flick his fingers in a nervous tick. "Okay," Izuku says, "just sit with me at lunch or something. I've seen how you sit outside, away from everyone else. So just come sit with me at our table." "All right." And that's it. There's nothing more to be said, so the two of them leave. About 2 minutes into their walk, Izuku is tackled by Kaminari again. "Midoriya thigh," he whines, disregarding Todoroki, who stood next to them looking incredibly confused. "Ashido is bullying me." "Not." And where one goes, the other often follows. "It's true," he says, hanging from Izuku's neck. "She wouldn't stop teasing me about Hitoshi. 'Cause you look like a tomato any time he even looks at you," she says. "Should I just go?" Todoroki asks. "No, they're like this all the time. Just wait, Hitoshi will appear in a minute or two and they'll forget I exist," Izuku says. "Speak of the devil and he shall appear. Look, see." Ashido shouts. As the moment Hitoshi walks up, Kaminari flushes red. "What even happened?" Izuku asks. "Ashido dash," Kaminari starts, before Ashido cuts him off. Hitoshi put his arm on the wall to fix his shoe, except Kaminari was leaning against the wall talking to him, so Hitoshi accidentally blocked him in, and Kaminari started blushing like an idiot. Ashido rambles. "Ashido. So that's why your face was so red," Hitoshi mumbles. "Have you never seen someone blush before?" Kaminari asks, finally releasing Izuku from his hold. "They're always like this?" Todoroki whispers. "There's never a moment that they aren't." "Well, I mean, yeah, I've seen people blush, but I didn't know what you were blushing about," Hitoshi explains. "That's stupid," Ashido says. "It's really not. I'm not exactly the most popular person, in case you haven't noticed," he says. "But you're really hot." Kaminari blurts, before his face turns even redder. "I feel like I should go," Todoroki says. "You can if you want," Izuku answers. "See you later." Todoroki walks away before Izuku can give him an answer. Hitoshi, on other hand, had completely blanked when Kaminari said that. "Kaminari!" Ashido shouts, "You broke him. And he needs to make it to the station if he doesn't want to wait for the 8 o'clock train home," Izuku says, grabbing Hitoshi by the arm to drag him away. "Oh God, I missed the 4 o'clock train," Kaminari mumbles. "How long do you have to wait?" "It's not too long. The next one runs at 5:30, so I should be fine." The conversation only dissolves from there as Izuku lead Hitoshi to the train station. He still misses his train. Hitoshi ends up staying the night at Izuku's instead of waiting for the 8 o'clock. He already had extra clothes stuffed into the bottom of Izuku's dresser for unexpected stays, and they don't have to go to school tomorrow, so Hitoshi figures he'll make the 2:30 train home. He calls his dad, explaining the situation, and Izuku faintly hears a voice on the other end say something about sending someone over with medicine in the morning, instead of going home on the 2:30 train, before he wishes Hitoshi well and hangs up. Papa is going to come over with my medicine at 7 so I can take it on time, instead of me getting on the train without taking my meds, so I'll ride back home with him, Hitoshi says. That's fine, Izuku mumbles, setting up a futon on the ground next to his bed. It hardly matters. He knows that one of them will end up in the other's bed in the middle of the night. Do you need to eat before or after you take them? Izuku asks. An hour before at most, Hitoshi says. Okay, I'll make breakfast at 6, so you can eat before he gets here. I'm gonna make breakfast for you one of these days, just to pay you back. Didn't you fail a cooking class twice? That teacher expected too much. He has the dream again. It's all silent this time, with Tsubasa lying on the ground in a pool of blood, darker than his wings, splayed out beneath him. He turns around, expecting Mrs. Tsubasa crying or screaming, but instead, his own mother stands there, shaking her head, looking terrified. Her dark green hair morphs, standing on end, becoming lighter. Her body changes, becoming taller, thinner, less feminine and more masculine until Hitoshi stands in front of him, angry, screaming at him. He points to the kitchen floor, and Izuku can see his dark voice warbling at the corners of his vision. His dreams never made him see colors before. He turns, looking to where Hitoshi is pointing, seeing Bakugo on the floor instead. He can hear Bakugo's voice, screaming at him, begging him to stop. It changes until it's Shigaraki's voice, then Ida's, then Todoroki's. Shiro begging him never to blind him. Bakugo screaming, crying. Ida making a promise that Izuku knows he won't keep. You don't know what I can do. Todoroki thanks him, but Izuku can't help but think he's done everything wrong. Bakugo's body doesn't change. He doesn't morph into someone else like Tsubasa had before him, like Inko had turned into Hitoshi. The voices stop, and the dream dissolves into nonsense. Hitoshi turns into Aizawa on their first day. The kitchen changes into some strange forest. There's no blood on the ground anymore, and Aizawa is doing some senseless juggling trick. Izuku doesn't wake up with a scream or a gasp. He wakes up slowly, feeling tears on his cheeks and hearing Bakugo's voice echoing in his ears. Hitoshi is already awake. He holds his arms out, turned on his side, and Izuku clambers out of his bed to curl into Hitoshi's chest, crying.